Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Tausha Morton. Dewayne Barrentine was a single father raising his 6-year-old son. Nothing is known about the child's mother. In June 2007, Dewayne and his son lived in the suburbs of Marianna, a small, sunny town in Florida, USA. Although Dewayne worked full-time to provide for his son, he made sure to spend as much time as possible with him on weekends. His parents helped care for the boy, and he also took his son to kindergarten, but the child missed having a mother's care, which concerned Dewayne. He often heard his son pray before bed, wishing for a mother. Dewayne decides to search for a suitable woman who can become his wife and a loving mother to his son. When Dewayne was picking up his son from kindergarten one day, a new teacher handed him a note with her phone number. Curiously, he asked whose number it was, and the woman said it was hers. Dewayne realized she was flirting with him. Attracted by the beautiful blonde, he took the chance and called her. During the conversation, they discovered that they had a lot in common. Tausha was also a single mother, newly moved to the city with her 6-year-old daughter, Lexie. At the time, Tausha was 31 years old and worked as a kindergarten teacher. When Dewayne and Tausha started dating, Tausha's daughter and Dewayne's son were the same age and quickly became friends. Lexie even called Dewayne Dad, which he was touched by. Tausha's daughter was a child from her previous marriage, a subject she did not want to discuss. Her private nature did not affect the couple in the early stages of their relationship. Within weeks, Lexie started calling Dewayne Daddy, and he really loved Lexie. Soon after, they moved in together, in Dewayne's house. He was delighted with his new partner. She was a beautiful and charming woman who showed her love through small, thoughtful gestures. It seemed like they had found each other and had a happy future ahead of them. Dewayne told his old friends and relatives that he loved her very much. To him, Tausha seemed perfect. However, not everyone was happy with their relationship. Dewayne's mother criticized him for rushing into a relationship and moving in together so quickly. She thought they should get to know each other better. But Dewayne ignored his mother's advice. Tausha says she doesn't want to discuss her past because of past hurts. Dewayne chose not to press her for more details to avoid upsetting her. Over time, as more stories about Tausha's past came to light, Dewayne noticed more and more inconsistencies. Some of the stories seemed particularly strange. Tausha claimed that her grandfather was a federal judge who died in a battery explosion and that she was supposed to inherit a large sum of money. However, there was no inheritance, and attempts to verify her stories were unsuccessful, even though such a significant event should have been easy to confirm. As they continued to live together, Dewayne noticed that Tausha often made up stories about her living. This worried him, so he decided to investigate further to learn more about her past. While searching the internet, he discovers that Tausha's first husband was a man named Mitch Kemp, but he was not her only husband. Dewayne uncovered that by age 31, she had been married 5 times, which Dewayne found unusual. And Mitch is Lexie's father. After much persuasion, Tausha finally confides in Dewayne, admitting that her marriage to Mitch was a mistake. She sees him as a friend and has no romantic feelings for him. Despite Dewayne's efforts, he is unable to find Mitch Kemp to gather more information about Tausha. Mitch seems to have disappeared. Tausha mentions that she has not heard from Mitch in years and has not attempted to contact him, which Dewayne finds strange. Dewayne eventually contacted Jones, one of Tausha's ex-husbands. He agreed to meet and talk. Dewayne shared that Tausha was hesitant to share her past with him, so she often made up stories about her life. Jones then revealed something to Dewayne that shocked him. Jones said that Tausha, while drunk, confessed that she was involved in the murder of one of her ex-husbands. According to Jones, Tausha had had a few drinks that night, which made her more talkative. According to Tausha, Mitch raped her daughter. She could not forgive him for this act. At the time, Tausha was married to another man named Greg Morton. She told him about the incident and Greg became extremely angry. Instead of reporting Mitch to the police, they decided to take matters into their own hands. Together, they planned to kill Mitch. Tausha lures Mitch to her new home and Greg waits for Mitch there, shooting him multiple times in the heart. Jones did not believe his wife's story because it seemed like she was making it up. Because she told it while she was drunk, which is why he did not go to the police. However, Dewayne became suspicious because he could not find any contact information for Mitch, Lexie's biological father, whom she had married before Greg. He suspected that Mitch might be dead. This caused Dewayne to reconsider the facts he had heard and began searching for information. However, he could not find any evidence linking Tausha to the murder. So he continued living with Tausha. Despite his concerns, he decided to ignore the situation to ensure his son had a loving mother. She was very loving and caring towards him, which made him doubt Jones' story, so he stopped looking for more information. The couple planned their wedding. After a few months, Dewayne discovered that Tausha was cheating on him. They had an argument, and he kicked her out of the house. Feeling hurt, Dewayne decided to continue his investigation into her past. He went to her MySpace page, where he found a number of unread messages. People were asking if the account belonged to Mitch's ex-wife and wanted to know where she was. According to Mitch's relatives, Mitch had been missing for about 4 years and they had been looking for him the entire time. These messages worried Dewayne, piqued his interest in the story, and motivated him to continue his investigation. Dewayne reviewed all the information he had gathered. He noticed that Lexie's birth certificate bore the last name Kemp. Tausha had married Mitch shortly before she married Greg. One of Tausha's other ex-husbands, Jones, revealed that Tausha and Greg were involved in a conspiracy and that Mitch's murder was a disturbing fact. However, Dewayne could not take any further action as the clues to uncover the truth had run out. Dewayne went to the Marianna Police Department and told the sheriff his story. The police officers listened carefully and were interested in the part involving Mitch Kemp. They started an investigation and asked Dewayne to keep it secret to avoid alarming Tausha. The police believed they were dealing with a murder case and even had suspects. This situation was unprecedented for the town's police, as it was the first time a civilian had independently used social networks to uncover clues to solve an old crime. The police were particularly impressed by Dewayne's accuracy in determining the dates and times of events. He showed a natural talent for investigation. However, the police still have to continue investigating on their own, using every clue to investigate the case. Police initially spoke with Jones, who told Dewayne the same story about Tausha's plot. The conversation was recorded. Police also contacted Mitch Kemp's relatives, who lived thousands of miles away in Boone County, Missouri. From his relatives, police were able to glean important information about the circumstances and timing of Mitch's disappearance. Mitch's family has always suspected Tausha of being involved in his disappearance. At this point, Tausha was 26 years old, and Mitch was almost 11 years her senior. Some people began to doubt her sincerity because she was much younger and very attractive. At first, their relationship seemed perfect, but soon Tausha became controlling and ignored his wishes and those of his family. Mitch, normally gentle and kind, put up with her behavior and became an easy target for manipulation. Despite this, their relationship continued. In 2002, the couple had a daughter and later got married. Unfortunately, their marriage was not long-lasting or happy. They faced financial problems and their relationship was very complicated. This unstable situation could not last. After 8 months, the marriage ended. Tausha left with her daughter. Not wanting to be a single mother, she met Greg Morton before her divorce was finalized. They started dating and she moved in with him along. They were married just 6 months after meeting. Mitch Kemp was very upset because he still loved Tausha and wanted to reconcile with her. However, Tausha refused to return to him, prompting Mitch to pursue joint custody of their daughter by filing a lawsuit. When he informed Tausha, she became very angry, especially after Mitch threatened to seek full custody. In August 2004, Mitch shared this conversation with his brother, also revealing that during their last meeting, Tausha had hit and spat at him. Just 2 weeks later, Mitch vanished without a trace. His brother tried to reach out to Tausha, suspecting she might know Mitch's whereabouts given their serious conflict over divorce and custody. Tausha denied any knowledge of Mitch's location and subsequently ignored all communication from his family. Meanwhile, she continued to pay her bills using funds from Mitch's bank account. Mitch's family was unable to find him, so they contacted the Boone County Sheriff's Department. Unfortunately, the search was unsuccessful and Mitch disappeared without a trace. The investigation reached a dead end and the case was archived without any active involvement. The police found no evidence or confirmation that Tausha and Greg were involved in Mitch's disappearance or murder. About 4 years later, in 2008, the police finally got Dewayne's story. The police believed Mitch was no longer alive. But they had no body, no murder weapon, and no crime scene. Ideally, they need a confession and the police need to talk to Tausha. So the police began looking for Tausha. When the police found her, they invited her to the station for questioning. When she arrived at the police station, Tausha expressed her desire to cooperate with the police. She was unaware that the police already knew about the murder story she had told Jones. She said she was not surprised by Mitch's disappearance, given his bad character, and suggested that someone might have sought revenge against him. When asked about her second husband, she mentioned that she had divorced Greg a long time ago and had little contact with him, knowing nothing about his current situation. Tausha also denied any involvement in Mitch's disappearance. However, the police believed they were on the right track and continued to pressure her to confess. Tausha initially described Greg as a normal, unremarkable person. However, as the police asked more questions, a darker side to Greg's personality emerged. He seemed intimidating, as Tausha began to describe him as aggressive and short-tempered. The police eventually convinced Tausha to confess that Greg had killed Mitch. According to her narrative, one day when she was not home, Mitch came over to discuss custody of their daughter. A heated argument broke out between Mitch and Greg, which escalated into a fight. During the fight, Greg pulled out a gun and shot Mitch several times in the chest. This incident occurred in August 2004. Tausha believes that there may have been hostility between Greg and Mitch, as Greg was extremely jealous and suspected her of having an affair with Mitch. Tausha had anticipated this possibility but hoped it would not come to pass. Fortunately, her daughter was not home at the time of the murder. She assured the police that she was not involved, did not encourage Greg to commit the murder, and did not turn him against Mitch, her ex-husband. She claimed that she only learned about the incident when Greg confessed to her, detailing how he shot Mitch. Tausha also provided information about where to find Mitch's body. Mitch's body was believed to be at the old farm, although she did not know the exact location. The farm was a large area, about 15 hectares, and had been sold after the murder. The old house had been demolished, and a new house had been built elsewhere, making it impossible to recreate the crime scene, which greatly hindered the search for the body. Despite Tausha's claims of innocence, the police began to suspect her, especially because of Jones's account of her presence at the crime scene and she had lured Mitch to meet the killer. This story warranted a thorough investigation, but could not proceed without the body being found. Tausha cooperated fully with the police. She agreed to travel with them from Florida to Missouri to search for Mitch's body on a farm. When she arrived, she was confused because the area had changed dramatically. Everything had been rebuilt and a new family was living there. As they walked around, Tausha focused on the location of the old house. Even though the buildings were destroyed, she confidently pointed out the location. However, the police found nothing there with their equipment, leading them to suspect that she might be lying. The police believed that Tausha should have known exactly where Mitch's body was. The search for the body on the farm continued. Despite the efforts of the searchers, they were still unable to find anything. After 5 weeks of painstaking and fruitless work, Tausha was questioned again, with the police applying even more pressure. This was to be expected, as they had excavated a large area without finding a single clue. At that moment, Tausha suddenly remembered a large hole being dug on the farm. Greg had buried the body there shortly after he told her about the murder. Tausha was able to point out the location on a map. The police focused their efforts on this spot, and within half an hour of digging, the police found human remains wrapped in a tarp. The body was quickly taken for forensic analysis, which confirmed that the remains belonged to Mitch Kemp, who had been reported missing. Forensic experts determined that he was murdered, finding 6 bullets in his chest that caused instant death. Mitch was shot at point-blank range, leaving him with no chance of survival. 3 weeks after his body was discovered, police arrested Greg Morton in St. Louis and charged him with first-degree murder. Police hoped he would denounce his ex-wife, Tausha, whom they suspected was also involved in the crime. However, Greg remained silent. Police believed that keeping him in custody would persuade him to talk, but this strategy failed. Even after spending months in jail, Greg still did not testify against Tausha. Despite this, police chose to arrest Tausha out of concern she might flee. Although the investigation lacked solid evidence, relying only on a witness statement, she was charged with first-degree murder. Tausha was arrested in the city. She later gave a different account of Mitch's death. She explained that she had indeed taken Mitch to the farm but claimed that she had no intention of leading him into a trap, as she did not know. Tausha intended to give Mitch pictures of their daughter at kindergarten and wanted to talk to him. However, Greg found out about them together. He approached with a gun and pointed it at Mitch. Before she could react, Greg shot Mitch 6 times in the chest. She believed Greg acted out of jealousy. After the shooting stopped, Greg pinned her against the wall, blaming her for provoking him and causing Mitch's death. She wanted to call the police, but it was too late to help Mitch. Greg forced her to be quiet and then disposed of the body by burying it in a large hole. Surprisingly, after these violent events, Tausha and Greg lived together for about a year and a half before they divorced. The police were baffled. How could she continue living with the man who killed the father of her child? However, Tausha explained that she feared ending the relationship would put her in danger. 3 weeks after Tausha was arrested, Greg finally spoke up and shared his account of the tragic events with the police. Greg admitted to shooting Mitch but claimed he was manipulated by his ex-wife. He said Tausha had told him about the rape and was seeking revenge. Greg insists that if it weren't for her urging, he wouldn't have hurt Mitch. Despite Greg's claims, Tausha maintained her innocence. In June 2010, nearly 6 years after Mitch's disappearance, Tausha Morton went to trial. Tausha's lawyers argued that she was a victim, trapped in an abusive relationship with violent Greg, who they said killed Mitch and threatened her into silence. Greg's defense argued that Tausha was responsible for the murder. They claimed that she had convinced Greg, her devoted second husband, to kill Mitch, with whom she was fighting for custody of their child. Tausha maintained to the end that she had nothing to do with the crime. However, the prosecution was certain that her manipulations caused the tragic event. The main evidence was the confession of Greg, the killer, who had accepted a plea deal in exchange for a reduced sentence for second-degree murder. The court ultimately sentenced Greg Morton to 19 years in prison. Tausha's defense claimed that Greg had fabricated the story to get a reduced sentence. They argued that Greg had acted out of jealousy, leading him to shoot the innocent victim, Mitch. During the trial, a neighbor who lived near the couple at the time of the incident testified. He described Greg as domineering, asserting complete control over his wife and demanding that she follow his orders without question. It was clear that Tausha feared Greg and was unable to manipulate him. Then, Tausha's ex-husband, Jones, became a key witness. He recounted a story that Tausha had shared while drunk during their marriage, claiming that she had invited Mitch to the farm with the intention of killing him. However, Tausha denied that this conversation ever happened, claiming that Jones learned the story from Greg, not her. She believes Jones is protecting Greg. Besides listening to the testimony, the jury had to watch over 8 hours of interrogation footage. Tausha's lawyer believed she would be acquitted. The jury recognized that she had cooperated with the investigation from the start, helped in the search, and without her, Mitch's body might never have been found. Her defense argued that if Tausha were involved in her ex-husband's death, she wouldn't have led police to this clue. However, Tausha may have had a motive, as Mitch was fighting for custody of their child. Tausha claimed that Mitch saw Lexie regularly, and they never fought over custody. After 8 hours of deliberations, the jury returned to the courtroom and found Tausha Morton guilty of first-degree murder. The jury explained their decision by noting that Tausha's story had changed several times, while Greg's story remained consistent. They concluded that Tausha had lied and manipulated Greg into killing Mitch. The verdict came as a complete shock to Tausha. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Tausha attempted to appeal her sentence, but her efforts were unsuccessful. Mitch's family celebrated the verdict, feeling that justice had finally been served. Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Tanya McKinley. Tanya McKinley was born on January 25, 1961, in Milton, a small town in Florida, USA. She grew up in a loving family and had a close relationship with her older sister. As children, they often played outside, skateboarded, and went bowling. After graduating from high school, Tanya decided to move to Pensacola, about 25 miles away from her hometown, to explore the medical field and become a medical transcriptionist. To become a medical transcriptionist, Tanya did not need a medical degree but only had to take special courses. She moved in with her cousin, Vanita, to save on rent. In Pensacola, Tanya met a boy named Tim, and they began dating. They later moved in together, and in 1983, their son Timothy was born. However, Tanya's relationship with Tim was not perfect. They argued frequently, and about a year after Timothy was born, they decided to separate. At the end of 1984, Tanya temporarily moved in with her cousin, Vanita, who was now married and had 2 children. Tanya planned to find her own place and move out as soon as she could. One day, Tanya, her sister, and Vanita's husband decided to go to a local bar to celebrate New Year's Eve. Vanita and Tanya dropped their children off at daycare and decided to enjoy the night. At the bar, they had a night full of laughter and music. As the clock struck midnight, they welcomed the new year, 1985. Vanita and her husband were about to go home, but the daycare they had left their children at closed at 1 a.m., so they needed to pick them up in an hour. However, Tanya wanted to stay at the bar a little longer because, for the past 2 years, she had been focused on work and taking care of her children. Tanya asked Vanita if she could pick up her son from daycare, and Vanita agreed since they lived together and needed to pick up her son anyway. Before Vanita and her husband left the bar, Vanita asked Tanya how she would get home since they had gone to the bar together by car. Tanya told Vanita not to worry and assured her that she would find a way home since she had many acquaintances at the bar. On the morning of January 1st, Vanita woke up and was surprised to find that Tanya had not returned. Normally, Tanya would have been home by then, so this delay was unusual. At first, Vanita was not too worried, thinking that Tanya might have stayed at a friend's house. However, things quickly changed when Vanita's mother-in-law knocked on their door with a shocking announcement. Tanya had been found dead in the early hours of the morning, around 3 a.m. A Pensacola resident had taken her dog to the vet for an urgent medical issue. While the woman was out, her daughter saw a strange object on the road. She thought it was a mannequin, but when she told her mother, the woman decided to take a closer look. She was horrified to realize it was actually a human body. She immediately returned home and called the police. Police arrived at the crime scene and found the body of a 23-year-old woman named Tanya McKinley lying in a vacant lot near the road. When they arrived, they found her pantyhose pulled down, her skirt pulled up, and her shoes missing. Police also found a blue scarf with a red stain that looked like blood next to the victim. Her shoes were found a few blocks away, along with a wallet containing identification in her name. To clarify the cause of Tanya's death and the development of the case, the police handed over the victim's body to medical experts for an autopsy. Investigators also continued to collect and analyze traces at the scene. After the initial investigation, it was discovered that the victim was likely killed elsewhere, as there was no blood near the body except for the blue towel stain. Furthermore, traces on the ground showed that the body had been dragged to the side of the road. On the blue towel and the victim's body, the police found some suspicious traces. These were human hair and pubic hair, along with dog hair. They suspected that these hair and pubic hair samples might belong to the killer and that this person might have kept dogs. After the autopsy, medical experts determined that Tanya suffered a head injury from being hit with a heavy object. However, the main cause of her death was strangulation. Furthermore, experts also confirmed that the victim had been sexually assaulted. Experts collected a semen sample from the victim's body, but at the time, DNA analysis was not widely used in forensic science. Therefore, they could only determine that the suspect had type B blood. Since these clues did not help the detectives find the killer, they began to develop a list of suspects. The first suspect they focused on was Tim, the victim's ex-boyfriend. Through talking to Tanya's relatives and friends, the police discovered problems in the relationship between Tanya and Tim, as well as constant arguments both before and after the birth of their son. When Tanya decided to break up, Tim objected and continued to try to convince her to come back. Tim kept calling Tanya, visiting her, and acting as if he could not accept the breakup. The police suspected that Tim may have followed Tanya to the bar on New Year's Eve, leading to a confrontation that ended in murder. They questioned Tim, but he denied any involvement. Tim also agreed to provide a hair sample for comparison. Although experts were unable to extract DNA from the hair, they were able to compare the hairs under a microscope. The results showed that Tim's hair was significantly different from the hair found on the victim's body and the towel. As a result, the police temporarily eliminated Tim as a suspect. After collecting clues at the scene, the detectives turned their attention to the people who were at the bar on New Year's Eve. They questioned Vanita about whether she had noticed anyone acting strangely or aggressively toward Tanya. However, Vanita said the evening had gone smoothly and without incident. Investigators also learned that Tanya had briefly dated a man named Kurt, who worked as a bartender at the same bar. So they interviewed Kurt, who denied any involvement in the murder. Kurt claimed that after finishing his shift, he attended a New Year's Eve party with friends. However, after questioning Kurt's friends, investigators discovered something interesting. Kurt's friends confirmed that he was at the party, but not immediately after finishing his shift at the bar. Based on this testimony, police believed that Kurt had enough time to theoretically commit the murder. Through interviews with many people who were at the bar, detectives determined that Tanya was last seen alive at 1:15 a.m., but no one witnessed her leaving the bar. Investigators also interviewed residents in the area near where the body was found. One family said they drove by around 2 a.m. and they were certain that no body was visible at that time. Investigators determined that Tanya was killed within an hour and a half of her last known sighting. During this time, Kurt had no solid alibi. He agreed to take a polygraph test, but the results were inconclusive as he gave several false answers. However, blood tests eliminated Kurt as a suspect because his blood type did not match the killer's blood type, which was determined from a semen sample. The police continued to search for other potential suspects, but their efforts were hampered. The killer's semen could not be analyzed, and the lack of significant evidence or witnesses left the case at a standstill. However, investigators were almost certain that the killer must have lived in the area near where the body was found. The area was on the edge of a large residential area and was isolated from major roads. Police suspected that a stranger would not have come there with the body without knowing anything about the area. To this day, the case remains unsolved. Sadly, Timothy lost his mother when he was 18 months old and was taken care of by his father and Tanya's family. They decided to keep the death of Timothy's mother a secret. As he grew older, relatives told him that his mother had died in a car accident. This truth was kept secret until Timothy turned 14. At Christmas, he was curious about the gift his father had prepared. While rummaging through the house, Timothy stumbled upon a letter written by his father, addressed to famous TV host Montel Williams. Tim mentioned Tanya's murder in the letter, hoping that public attention would help expedite the investigation. Through the letter, Timothy discovered the true fate of his mother because it contained specific details about the case. In 2000, the police department reopened Tanya's case, hoping that advances in DNA analysis would help identify the killer. To investigate, they sent all available evidence to a lab for analysis. After testing, experts concluded that the blood on the blue towel found near the body belonged to an unknown man, not Tanya. They took a sample of the man's DNA and uploaded it to the FBI database, but found no match. The case went cold again and wasn't reopened until 2015, exactly 30 years after the murder. Detectives had to try a different approach when the killer's DNA had not yet appeared in the FBI database. With modern technology, they could search not only for exact matches but also for partial matches. They believed the database might contain information about the killer's relatives, which could lead them closer to solving the case. After searching, they focused on one specific person in the FBI database. His DNA had some similarities to the DNA sample of Tanya's killer, although the similarity was not strong. The police investigated his family extensively and even contacted his relatives. They agreed to assist and provide their DNA samples for comparison. After analyzing the samples, experts discovered that the family had no connection to the suspect, leaving detectives without any significant new clues. In 2018, journalist Tony Adam took an interest in the case. Although he was not a criminal expert, his personal interest in the subject drew him to Tanya's unsolved murder. He wanted to help and contacted the investigators working on the case. The detectives initially viewed his willingness to help with some skepticism. Although an experienced journalist, Tony had no background in criminal investigations. However, as the case dragged on without any progress, the police accepted his help. During the investigation, Tony established a relationship with Tanya's family. They could see his genuine interest in solving the case and the considerable effort he was putting in. He worked to get media coverage of the case, bringing additional attention to it. This also contributed a new perspective to an investigation that had lasted for more than 3 decades. Detectives decided to renew their efforts to find the suspect's relatives. This time, they partnered with Parabon, a company specializing in genetic genealogy. In the previous effort, investigators had only searched for killers' relatives through the FBI's database. However, Parban expanded the search to include public genetic databases, where anyone can upload their DNA samples. Experts worked diligently to find the killer's relatives, carefully examining family trees to identify someone matching the suspect's characteristics. They were looking for a man who was of age at the time of the crime in 1985 and lived in the area. The process took nearly a year. But in February 2020, experts finally identified a man who could be a suspect, Daniel Wells, 57, who lived in the same city where the murder occurred. As detectives learned more about Daniel, they discovered he had previous run-ins with the law, having been arrested for assault and for indecent exposure in the late 1980s. As of 2020, Daniel continued to live and work in Pensacola with his family. However, to establish a connection between him and the case, investigators needed to collect a DNA sample from Daniel due to a lack of concrete evidence. The police had been monitoring Daniel closely, concerned that he might flee once he learned he was a suspect. The opportunity presented itself when Daniel discarded a cigarette butt near his workplace. Investigators collected it and quickly sent it to the lab. There, experts isolated DNA from the saliva on the butt and compared it to the DNA sample from the crime scene. The results showed that the two samples were a perfect match. 35 years after the murder, the police finally identified the culprit through DNA evidence. Daniel was arrested that same day. Despite the DNA test results, the investigators wanted to hear Daniel's confession. They planned to conduct the interrogation carefully, not revealing all the evidence at once. The investigators deliberately withheld information to encourage honesty during Daniel's interrogation. They gradually shifted the conversation to Tanya's murder and asked about Daniel's whereabouts on the night of the crime. At first, he denied ever knowing Tanya. The detectives then revealed that they had found his DNA at the crime scene. Although Daniel continued to deny everything, he appeared to become more nervous with each question. The detectives emphasized the importance of the DNA test results, making it impossible for him to avoid the questions. They told him that the only way to alleviate the situation was to confess. And it worked. Daniel began to tell his story. Initially, he tried to justify the presence of his DNA by suggesting that he might have had sex with Tanya that night. But the detectives didn't believe him and continued pressing for the truth. Daniel eventually confessed to killing Tanya on that New Year's Eve. Daniel's story raised serious questions. He admitted that he met Tanya at a bar and offered to take her home. They then went to Daniel's house, drank, and had consensual sex. However, an argument broke out, and Daniel couldn't remember what it was about. In a fit of rage, Daniel picked up a heavy wooden cutting board and hit Tanya over the head. When he realized she was dead, he panicked and took her body to another location to dispose of it. On the way back, he discarded her belongings and returned home. However, Daniel's story had many inconsistencies. When asked about the dog hairs on Tanya's clothes and towels, he explained that his roommate had a black Labrador. But this did not explain why Tanya would willingly have sex with him only to have a violent argument that led to her death. Furthermore, Daniel claimed that Tanya died from a blow to the head, but medical experts determined that the actual cause of death was strangulation. This made Daniel's story unreliable and suggested he was trying to minimize his responsibility. A more plausible scenario is that Daniel attacked Tanya, but she fought back. When this failed, Daniel struck Tanya's head, but then realized she was still alive, so he strangled her. Although Daniel's confession did not completely match the facts, detectives had enough evidence to arrest him. Daniel was arrested for murder and taken into custody. Investigators then contacted Tanya's family, including her son, to let them know that the killer had been caught. Timothy was emotional and thanked the police for finding his mother's killer. However, Daniel did not face trial or serve any prison time for his actions. Just 2 weeks after his arrest, Daniel's body was found in his cell. An autopsy revealed that he had committed suicide. Although Tanya's family was disappointed that the killer had committed suicide in prison, they finally received justice after 35 years. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Gabby Doolin. Gabby Doolin was born on December 26, 2007, in Scottsville, Kentucky, to her father, Brian Doolin, and mother, Amy Doolin. Scottsville is a small farming community where many people know each other. The town does not have many options for entertainment, so school sports are a big part of the locals' lives, especially soccer. Schools host regular games and tournaments, and for the locals, participating in sports is a tradition. Gabby's family is no exception. She has 2 older brothers, and her parents encouraged their children to participate in sports. When Gabby turned 7 in November 2015, her town prepared for the biggest football game of the year. Her school's football team would be playing against a team from another county. Gabby's older brother was on the football team, and she was on the cheerleading squad. The whole town was looking forward to the game. Gabby's family was going to the game, and Gabby convinced Brian and Amy to let her go with them. They initially planned to leave Gabby at home but eventually agreed to take her. When they got to the stadium, Gabby was excited to see her friends and asked her mom if she could hang out with them. Amy agreed but asked her to stay on campus and play with the other kids. During the entire time, Gabby kept running back and forth between her mom and her friends, playing and having a good time. Gabby also went to Brian in the announcer's room and asked for some money to buy snacks. After a while, Gabby's friends came up to Amy in the stands. Her mom took one look and noticed that Gabby wasn't among them. Gabby's friends asked her if she had seen Gabby and were worried. Amy said she hadn't seen Gabby in a while. She then asked why they were worried, and the girls explained that they had been playing hide and seek. Gabby had been assigned to look for them, and they had been hiding in the restroom. However, as time passed and Gabby had not arrived, the girls decided to leave the hideout to look for her. When they left the hideout, the girls could not find Gabby. They called her name and checked all the places they had played before, but Gabby seemed to have disappeared. The girls began to worry and thought that Gabby might have gone to the stands with her mother. After hearing the story, Amy began to panic and ran to her husband. Amy told Brian that Gabby was missing. Brian immediately began searching the area around the stadium. Meanwhile, Amy went to the snack bar where Gabby wanted to go and began looking for her there. After searching and finding no sign of Gabby outside the waiting areas around the stadium, Brian and Amy returned to the broadcast room and made an announcement over the loudspeaker in the hope that Gabby would hear them. This did not yield any results. Brian and Amy did not give up and continued to ask the people present to let them know if they knew where Gabby was. And several people joined them in the search for Gabby. They then continued to search the area around the stadium and asked the workers to light up the stadium areas with large lights. They also went deep into the surrounding areas of the baseball field, especially the small woods behind it. Despite their efforts, they still did not find her. It had been about a quarter of an hour since Gabby had gone missing, and Brian and Amy decided to call the police. The police arrived shortly after, heard what Gabby's parents and friends had to say, and immediately began an urgent search. While there had been previous missing persons cases, none had involved children. As such, they were rare in small towns, and the police were immediately faced with the worst-case scenario, especially when there were signs of crimes involving children, such as kidnappings and assaults. In that context, they were immediately faced with another difficult problem: the perpetrator could be at the stadium. This fact made the police alert and accelerated the investigation. The police realized that they did not have much time and that everyone would be going home soon. Therefore, they decided to stop the game and lock down the stadium, keeping everyone inside. The police closely guarded all exits to prevent anyone from sneaking out. To avoid disrupting the search efforts, the police did not inform people about what was happening. If people knew that the police were investigating the kidnapping of a 7-year-old girl that had occurred nearby, the situation could have become chaotic. Meanwhile, the state police arrived at the school and began searching the area. In a location in the woods, they stumbled upon a small creek and discovered the body of a young girl. They identified the victim as Gabby and called an ambulance to take the body to the medical examiner's office. After a preliminary examination, the police determined that the girl's cause of death was asphyxiation, as there were obvious marks on her neck. Furthermore, part of the girl's clothing was missing, leading the police to suspect that Gabby had been sexually assaulted. Amy saw an ambulance near the woods and thought that the police had found her daughter, so she rushed there but was stopped by the police. They did not want her to see the horrific scene. The police were investigating the murder and decided to move everyone from the stadium to the school gym. They suspected that the killer might be among them and needed to find a way to identify him. The detectives spoke to Brian and Amy, telling them about what might have happened to Gabby. The detectives also asked Brian and Amy if they had any suspicions about who might have committed this heinous act. They wanted to know if they had noticed anyone suspicious or if anyone had threatened their family. However, Brian and Amy insisted that they had no idea who might have done this. The detectives then spoke to Gabby's friends, asking them if they had seen anything strange. The detectives wanted to know if anyone had been following or watching them. But the girls said they could not recall anything of the sort. The police also took Gabby's friends to the gym and asked them to take a close look at the people present. They hoped that the girls might remember something. However, this did not lead to anything. The detectives believed that Gabby's friends might have seen the kidnapper but were too afraid to point him out or did not realize the significance of what they had seen due to their age. So the detectives asked them to recall every detail of that evening. Finally, one of them recalled that while she and Gabby were in the bathroom, she had seen a man standing near the door. The girl could barely remember what he looked like, except that he was wearing a denim jacket. The police questioned the ticket seller at the game, and he also remembered the man with the denim jacket. He said the man looked strange and drunk. However, the police were still unable to identify the man. The police continued to interview the people who attended the game, and gradually everyone learned why they were being held. When they realized that they might be in the same room as the killer, everyone was scared, especially for the safety of their children. But they still cooperated with the police and answered their questions. Investigators compared the list of names of all the men in the gym to the sex offender registry but found no matches. The police also visited the homes of several sex offenders who lived nearby, but all had solid alibis, and none of them were near the school at the time. Meanwhile, the police continued to interview people at the school and found some important clues. Some people told the police that during the game, they saw a man named Timothy Madden near the girls' restroom, acting suspiciously. He was a local, so many people knew him. Witnesses also said that he was wearing a denim jacket, a description that matched that given by one of Gabby's friends, who also saw a man near the restroom. Another witness was a distant relative of Timothy. He said that Timothy seemed unusual during the game. His youngest son was playing on the field, but Timothy was not paying attention. This was very strange because Timothy was usually very interested in his son's athletic achievements. He even seemed lost. Other witnesses also said that Timothy's behavior seemed strange, which prompted investigators to talk to him. By nightfall, almost everyone at the school had been released. The officers decided to go and question Timothy, but they had first consulted with the local police chief. The police chief had known Timothy since childhood and thought that Timothy was unlikely to commit his crimes, citing that Timothy's criminal record was mostly clean, except for minor traffic fines. The officers then went to Timothy's home, where he lived with his wife and 5 children. When they arrived, the officers knocked on the door and Timothy answered. They asked him if he knew why they were there. He replied that he knew about Gabby's murder but denied any involvement. In an attempt to elicit a response, the detectives asked if he had any explanation for a video recording showing him talking to the victim, Gabby, before she was killed. In fact, no such video existed. Timothy initially said he did not know what the officers were referring to. However, he quickly recanted his statement. He admitted that he had spoken to Gabby that evening near the stadium. He explained that he had stepped outside to smoke a cigarette when a group of girls ran past him. Moments later, Gabby walked by and asked if he had seen her friends while they were playing hide-and-seek and needed to be found. Timothy claimed to have directed her to the girls, and then she left. Detectives were skeptical of Timothy's rapidly changing story. His account indicated that he had been at the scene just minutes before the victim went missing, and there were no witnesses outside the stadium at the time, raising concerns that he may have had the opportunity to commit the crime. Detectives then asked for DNA samples and the clothes he was wearing at the stadium, which Timothy agreed to. However, when examining the clothing, police discovered what appeared to be blood stains on his pants, denim jacket, and underwear. When asked about the stains, Timothy claimed that they were just stains and that the police had made a mistake. Detectives were skeptical, but they needed to wait for the results of DNA analysis before making an arrest. Although the case was a priority for the lab, the analysis took several days to complete. The medical examiner completed an autopsy and confirmed that Gabby's cause of death was indeed strangulation. They then took a biological sample from Timothy, which was sent to the lab for analysis. Police received an unexpected lead in the form of an anonymous letter reporting a suspicious man at the game. The letter included specific details, such as the make and model of the person's car and the license plate number. This allowed investigators to quickly identify the owner of the car. The owner of the car, a student who lived about half an hour's drive from Scottsville, was quickly questioned by police. However, he denied attending the game and claimed not to have heard of the murder. He also provided an alibi, saying he was at work that evening. Police checked his alibi and found it credible, eliminating him as a suspect. However, the anonymous letter writer was never identified, leaving questions about the letter writer's motives. It is possible that someone was trying to frame the innocent student or play a prank on him. Police received another lead after several people reported suspicious behavior by a local 16-year-old boy. He initially claimed to have attended the game, but later denied having done so. He also mentioned witnessing girls playing hide-and-seek. Upon further investigation, detectives discovered that the boy was Timothy Madden's son. Furthermore, they discovered that just 2 weeks before the murder, the boy had gotten into a heated argument with his father, even holding a knife to his father's neck and threatening to kill him. When the police learned of this information, they went to the boy to investigate. However, they needed the boy's parents to be present to conduct the investigation. The boy's mother refused to provide a DNA sample, preventing the police from conducting further investigation. Rumors about this investigation spread quickly in Scottsville. People began to talk about the police investigating the Madden family in connection with Gabby's murder. Various theories were put forward, with some people thinking that one of Madden's older sons might be the culprit. Others suspected Madden himself or thought that he might be covering for his sons. Gabby's parents also heard about these rumors and were shocked. Gabby's father had known Timothy since 3rd grade and knew the family well. Their sons had played football together, and their daughters had cheered together. The two families were very close, even sitting next to each other at games. So Gabby's parents found it hard to believe that anyone in the Madden family could be involved in the murder. After rumors spread throughout the town, the Maddens' eldest son, then 20, began exchanging information with local officers on social media using profanity and threats, asking them to keep their distance from his family. Due to the content of his threats, the police were forced to arrest him immediately and discovered that he had an outstanding warrant for his arrest in another town. Specifically, he was suspected of assaulting a teenage girl. After being brought in for questioning, he insisted that he was not the perpetrator of the murder and that he was simply upset about the accusations against his family. Importantly, he said he had been at his cousin's house in a nearby town on the night of the murder. He also agreed to provide a DNA sample to assist in the investigation. Gabby's funeral took place on November 20th, 6 days after the murder, and was attended by hundreds of people from Scottsville and the surrounding areas. They raised a significant amount of money to help Gabby's parents cover funeral expenses. Meanwhile, the DNA analysis of Timothy and his son had been completed at the lab, and the samples had been compared to the blood and semen samples collected. The results of the analysis showed that the DNA evidence was a perfect match. The semen found on Gabby's body belonged to Timothy Madden, and the blood on Timothy's clothing belonged to Gabby. As soon as this information was available, detectives notified Brian and Amy of the discovery of the killer. At the same time, the police also went to Timothy's house and arrested him. When Timothy was taken to the police station, he shouted to reporters that he was innocent. He later explained that the blood on his clothes was from scratching himself while passing through a fence. This contradicted his initial statement to the police that it was not blood but mud. With the DNA evidence matching, the investigators took the case to court, and the prosecution announced that they would seek the death penalty. During the preparation for trial, Timothy's lawyer asserted that his client was innocent and that the source of the evidence was questionable. The lawyer argued that Timothy was at the stadium at the time of the murder to film the game. However, Timothy himself told the police that he had seen Gabby at the same time. The attorney also pointed out that although Gabby's body was found in a creek, Timothy's clothes were dry when he returned to the stadium, raising questions about the accuracy of the evidence. Timothy's mother claimed that her son returned home in clean clothes, did not appear to be upset, and behaved as usual. However, the prosecution argued that the suspect's semen found on the victim's body disproved all of these arguments. The presence of semen could not be explained otherwise, and therefore Timothy's involvement in the case could not be denied. The police believe that Timothy's account of that evening contained some truth. He may have left the stadium during the game and encountered Gabby, who was looking for her friend. Since Gabby knew Timothy well, she may have approached him and asked for information about her friends. That may have been when Timothy came up with a plan, suggesting that the friends had run into the woods behind the baseball field and offering to escort Gabby there. When Gabby and Timothy were only a few hundred meters from the school, Timothy could have attacked Gabby and then returned to his friends. For years after the murder, in 2019, the parties began discussing a plea deal. The prosecution proposed to overturn the death penalty and exchange it for a life sentence on the condition that Timothy admitted his guilt. Brian and Amy agreed to this decision because the wait for trials was a heavy burden for them. They also worried that if the trial began, they would have to attend hearings for months, reliving the pain of their daughter's death all over again. Timothy eventually agreed and confessed. However, the agreement did not require him to reveal the details of what he had done. He only had to admit his guilt. This did not satisfy Gabby's family, who wanted Timothy to fully admit what he had done to their daughter. During Timothy's trial, the atmosphere became tense when Brian loudly yelled at Timothy. Eventually, the judge had to intervene, suspend the trial, and order the men to be separated. As a result, Timothy was sentenced to life in prison and served his sentence in a maximum security prison. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Jessica Knott. Jessica Knott was born on June 22, 1986, in Allamon Springs, Florida. She grew up in a happy family with an older brother, a younger sister, and loving parents. Her father traveled frequently for work in several states, so he was not always home. As a child, Jessica was active and cheerful. She enjoyed spending time outdoors with her friends and siblings and had a special love for animals. On April 5, 1996, when she was 9 years old, her family decided to visit her grandparents for Easter. That morning, her father left the house to do some shopping, while her mother stayed behind to clean up and prepare for the trip. After school, Jessica came home and asked her mother if she could go out to play in the apartment complex. The area was relatively safe because it was far from the main road and had many trees around. Her mother agreed but asked Jessica to play only in the yard. A few hours later, around 6 p.m., Jessica's father returned home and asked his wife where Jessica was. She was surprised because her daughter was supposed to be in the yard waiting for her father, but he insisted that she was not there. The parents went outside and searched the yard but did not find Jessica. Feeling worried, they decided to ask the neighbors in the hope that someone had seen their daughter. One neighbor said that he had seen Jessica in the front yard, sitting on the couch reading a book. But that did not help in finding Jessica. When darkness fell and their daughter was still missing, they decided to call the police. The police arrived a few minutes later and began searching and interviewing the neighbors. Despite their efforts, they could not find Jessica, so they expanded the search area to nearby streets. A few hours later, the police station received an unexpected call. The caller's voice was drowned out by loud noise, but the operator could still hear it. The caller revealed that the police would find the missing girl near a water pump station a few miles from her home. The police rushed to the pump station to check on the caller's instructions and witnessed a heartbreaking scene. Before them was the body of a girl lying near the station, hidden in a black trash bag. Just a few meters from the road, the pump station was under a bridge and could not be seen. The police quickly identified the victim as Jessica Knott and turned her body over to the medical examiner. Meanwhile, investigators focused on finding the person who made the 911 call and reported the news, as they believed the call came from the killer. But there was a challenge. The call was made from a public phone at a gas station less than a mile from the crime scene, and by the time the police arrived, the perpetrator was gone. Detectives tried to find fingerprints on the phone, but it was quite a challenge. A public phone could have many fingerprints. Furthermore, investigators realized that the criminal could have wiped the phone after making the call or used gloves. Experts concluded that Jessica was killed elsewhere and her body was moved to the water pump station. Marks on the ground in front of the pump station suggested that the killer could have dragged Jessica's body from a car and dragged it across the ground. Jessica's clothes were intact except for one shoe. Police could not find it in her pocket or in the surrounding area. The only clue found at the crime scene was tire marks on the ground. Police could not be sure that they belonged to the killer's car, but they took pictures of them. Medical experts performed an autopsy and determined that Jessica died from strangulation based on marks on her face and neck. It appeared that the killer did it with his bare hands. A hamburger was also found in her stomach, consumed less than an hour before her death. Her mother said she had not given Jessica anything of the sort that day, leading police to believe the food had been provided to her by the killer. Experts also found no signs of sexual assault, leaving the killer's motive unclear. Police initially suspected Jessica's parents because neither had a solid alibi for the time of her disappearance. Jessica's mother claimed that she was packing her belongings in the apartment, while her father went shopping. However, both had the opportunity to commit the crime, theoretically. Police were trying to figure out how the killer had taken Jessica out of the complex's courtyard without anyone noticing or without her calling for help. This led them to suspect that the killer may have known the victim and that she had left voluntarily. Another factor that supported this theory was the killer's tone during the 911 call. Although experts tried to erase the recording, they still noticed sadness and regret in the killer's voice, as if he truly regretted his actions. The killer's actions when calling 911 spoke volumes. It is possible that the killer did this for the thrill of toying with the police and manipulating the investigation, or that he truly regretted his actions and wanted to somehow alleviate that feeling. However, upon closer examination, investigators are inclined to the second option: that the killer truly regretted his actions. The police checked Jessica's father's car and found an important detail in the trunk. It was a roll of black garbage bags similar to the one in which the victim's body was found. However, after analysis, experts determined that this bag was not similar to the other bags in the father's car. Therefore, Jessica's father was eliminated as a suspect and investigators turned their attention to other people. Forensic experts studied the victim's clothes and body for clues. They found several important traces. There was a large amount of dog hair on the victim's body, which was very strange because Jessica's family did not own dogs. This suggested that the dog might belong to the killer. They also found human hair on the girl's body, which belonged to an unidentified white male. However, it took experts a few days to extract the man's DNA profile. Two types of strange fibers were also found on the victim's clothing. After analysis, experts concluded that one type of fiber could have come from the car seat cover and the other from the carpet. This further supported the theory that the victim had been killed elsewhere and taken to the water station by car. Experts attempted to identify the breed of the dog from the hairs on Jessica's clothing using an FBI database. This database contains microscopic photographs of hairs from many different dog breeds and has proven useful in criminal cases. The process of identifying the breed of the dog is done by comparing the hairs to samples from the database and eliminating each breed one by one. They eventually concluded that the hair on the victim's clothes came from a Shar-Pei. This suggested that the killer may have owned such a dog and that the hair had gotten on Jessica's clothes while she was in the killer's car or at their home. Investigators developed a preliminary theory that the killer may have lured Jessica into his car, taken her to McDonald's for a hamburger, then taken her home and killed her. Meanwhile, experts were also trying to improve the phone call recording. However, this was a challenging task. To solve this problem, detectives sought help from NASA. NASA has advanced tools for improving recordings, originally designed to improve recordings from space. They agreed to help and provided the police with a higher quality recording. Experts needed a voice sample from the suspect to compare with the call recording and determine a match. Because detectives suspected that the killer might know Jessica, they decided to play the recording of the call to her mother. Jessica's mother listened to the recording and said that the voice sounded familiar, but she couldn't remember who it belonged to. However, after listening to the recording a second time, Jessica's mother recognized the voice as that of a neighbor who lived in the same complex. She added information to detectives that the man often walked a Shar-Pei in the yard. Police quickly identified the man as James Crow, 35. During the initial investigation, investigators interviewed him along with other neighbors. He said that he saw Jessica in the yard while walking her dog. They talked for a while, and then he left. Detectives looked into his background and discovered that James had no criminal record. He lives with his wife, a nurse, and is currently unemployed, spending most of his time walking the streets with a Shar-Pei named Pumpkin. The detectives realized that James's voice and the fact that he owned a dog of the same breed were not enough to arrest him. So they obtained a search warrant for his car. During the search, they discovered two troubling clues. Under the front passenger seat, they found an empty Happy Meal bag, which was suspicious since Jessica had eaten a hamburger. Experts also noticed that his car had brand new tires, as if they had barely been used. The police discovered that James had replaced the tires on the day of Jessica's murder, even though his previous tires were not very old and could have lasted for several more years. James claimed to have left the old tires at a car repair shop, which was unusual since they were not old at all. The police went to the service center to investigate. When they arrived, only one of James's tires was left. They compared its tread pattern to those found near the body. However, the results showed that they did not match. Detectives were not 100% certain that the tire tracks on the ground were left by the killer's car, as it was possible that the tire tracks were from a maintenance vehicle that regularly visited the area. Police searched James's apartment and found a box containing rolls of trash bags that matched the bags found on the victim's body. Although not direct evidence, detectives decided to investigate whether there was any way to determine if the bags collected at the scene and at James's home came from the same manufacturer. However, identifying these bags was difficult because they had no distinct markings, and there were hundreds of similar manufacturers. To address this challenge, detectives contacted Roberts, who was in charge of quality control at a bag manufacturing company. Roberts was able to identify the factory that produced the bags found in James's apartment through the code on the cardboard box containing the rolls. This product was manufactured at a facility in Virginia. Experts discovered that small amounts of iron or titanium were present in the bag's composition depending on their color. Since the materials are constantly changing during the manufacturing process, the ratio of plastic to iron or titanium actually changes daily. Detectives decided to take bags from James's apartment and the crime scene to measure the ratio of elements in the plastic using high-intensity X-rays. This gave them a very accurate ratio. Careful analysis showed that the ratio of iron to titanium in both plastic bags was the same, which suggested that they were manufactured on the same day and even in the same batch. The process of manufacturing garbage bags often leaves a small amount of microscopic debris on the machine, which is normal. However, when the plastic sheets are cut into bags, this debris forms small streaks that can be seen with the naked eye. Each roll of bags will have a unique pattern made up of these streaks. The pattern on each bag was created by particles of debris moving down the conveyor belt, which were then replaced by new particles. As a result, the same pattern would be retained over several hundred feet of fabric. This suggests that the two bags were not only produced in the same batch but also within a few hours of each other. When comparing the bags from the suspect's apartment in the crime scene, experts found that the lines on them matched remarkably well. Furthermore, after production, the bags were rolled into a bundle by a machine, but the machine often did this unevenly. Without close observation, these deviations were barely noticeable, making the rolls appear smooth. When examining the edges of the bags, there were small folds and wrinkles that formed a unique pattern similar to streaks. Experts compared and found that the pattern on the bags from James's apartment matched exactly the pattern on the bags at the crime scene. This meant that with a high probability, the bag from the crime scene had been taken from James' apartment. In addition, forensic analysts compared fibers found on Jessica's clothing with those from the carpet in James' apartment and the seat cover of his car. The results showed that both samples matched. Furthermore, an audio expert compared the recording of the 911 call with James' voice sample and concluded that they matched. Although the experts had collected a significant amount of evidence, the detectives still faced the major problem that all the evidence collected was circumstantial. However, the police were confident of James's involvement in Jessica's murder and decided to arrest him. Since James continued to deny his guilt, the case went to trial. The prosecution presented their report on how the crime occurred. James spent a lot of time outside with his dog, and all the local kids knew him well. They often played with Pumpkin, James' dog, and therefore, they trusted him. Jessica was no exception, and this trust may have led to her becoming a victim. The police provided an explanation of what happened on the day Jessica went missing. At that time, James was walking his dog and saw her sitting alone on a bench. He approached her, started chatting, and then invited her to McDonald's to buy her a hamburger. Jessica knew James quite well, so she agreed. According to the police, on that day, James noticed Jessica sitting alone on a bench while he was walking his dog and started chatting with her. He offered to take her to McDonald's, promising to buy her a hamburger, and Jessica agreed because she knew him well. After eating at the restaurant, he may have taken her back to the apartment complex and invited her to his home. He may have asked her to play with Pumpkin. The presence of carpet fibers from his living room on Jessica's clothes suggests she was there on the day of her death. According to the investigation, James may have intended to attack Jessica, but something went wrong. Based on the autopsy results, the perpetrator not only strangled her with his bare hands but also pressed his palms against her face. This may be evidence that she tried to scream, causing the perpetrator to panic and attack. After Jessica's death, James placed her body in a garbage bag and put it in his car to transport it to a disposal site without arousing suspicion. James drove a few miles to a nearby water station, where he left Jessica's body. He then returned to his house, perhaps after stopping at a gas station to make a phone call. During the preliminary hearing, James' attorneys attempted to dismiss all available evidence, arguing that there was no solid evidence to prove their client's guilt. However, in capital cases, the standard of proof is much higher. In James's case, he had a very good chance of avoiding the death penalty. Based on these facts, a plea deal was proposed to James. Under the deal, James would admit to second-degree murder and receive a 40-year prison sentence without the possibility of parole, thereby avoiding the death penalty. In the summer of 1998, 2 years after the murder, James agreed to the deal. Although he was not required to disclose details of the crime, James mentioned that part of his decision was to spare Jessica's family the long ordeal of a trial. The prosecution believed James had shown remorse, as demonstrated by his 911 call. However, the purpose of this call remains unclear. The only plausible explanation is that James genuinely wanted to reduce his guilt for such a serious crime. Jessica's parents were unhappy with the deal because they wanted their daughter's killer to receive the death penalty. They were also disappointed that James refused to confess to the crime. What was even more disappointing was that James did not serve his entire prison sentence due to poor health. He died in November 2011 at the age of 49, taking the secret of Jessica's murder with him. Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Jasmine Kaur. Jasmine Kaur, an Indian girl, was born on September 14, 1999. She is the eldest daughter of Rashel Kaur. Jasmine later had 2 younger twin brothers named German and Suku. When Jasmine was 6 years old, her father Rashel Kaur passed away. The family had to face many difficulties to overcome this pain. In 2017, Jasmine was 18 years old and decided to start a new journey. She came to Australia with her relatives to seek new opportunities. Jasmine's uncle, who lived in Adelaide with his wife and daughter, moved in with them. Because of her love of learning and desire to help others, Jasmine enrolled at the University of South Australia. After completing her exams, she enrolled in a nursing program. Apart from studying, Jasmine also takes on the responsibility of cooking for her family. She cooks very well. Jasmine has proven herself to be a responsible and diligent woman. Jasmine grew up in a good educational environment. She always kept in touch with her family, especially her mother and close relatives, sharing details of her daily life. To gain practical experience, Jasmine took a job at a nursing home in the suburbs of Adelaide before completing her medical studies. At the same time, a young man named Tarakjot Singh, Born in 1999 in a village in the state of Punjab, India, Tarak Jat had a younger brother named Mohan Singh. Tarak Jat's father often resolved conflicts in the family in a very brutal way. So the atmosphere in Tarak Jat's house was often very tense and made both brothers feel scared. Tarak Jat is known for his kindness and success, always willing to help people around him. At school, he was an excellent student. In 2016, when Tarak Jat finished his studies, his grandparents tried to save a small amount of money to help him move to Australia. Finally, Tarak Jat moved to the beautiful city of Adelaide. Tarak Jat passed the English test, a necessary requirement for admission to the University of South Australia. At that time, he was faced with many choices about his direction and field of study. In the end, he decided to pursue information technology and aimed to get a bachelor's degree. In addition to studying, Tarak Jat also had to work to support himself. Tarak Jat tried many different jobs, mainly related to caring for the elderly. His colleagues loved and respected him, and employers appreciated his honesty and kindness. Over time, Tarak Jat achieved much success. Eventually, he saved up enough money to buy his own apartment on the outskirts of the city. There, Tarak Jat befriended a young man named Edwin. In 2018, Jasmine and Tarak Jat met for the first time. Tarak Jat and Jasmine were colleagues at their part-time job. Their relationship quickly developed into love. Tarak Jat he identified Jasmine as the person he wanted to build a family life with. However, as time passed, Tarak Jat gradually became jealous. He began to suspect Jasmine. He asked Jasmine to report her activities in detail, controlled her every move, and became jealous when she met friends after work. Tarak Jat became too controlling in his relationship with Jasmine. Tarak Jat kept calling and making baseless accusations. Jasmine felt that she could not bear this kind of life, so Jasmine confided in her mother about these problems. The mother knew and did not approve of their relationship. Tarak Jat remained unchanged and believed that his thinking was correct. Tarak Jat bought a ring to propose to Jasmine in October 2020, although he felt that Tarak Jat was jealous and controlling. Jasmine still accepted his proposal. Jasmine began to feel insecure when Tarak Jat unexpectedly appeared at her workplace. Although Jasmine was very happy to have just experienced the feeling of being proposed to, Jasmine began to doubt Tarak Jat's actions. Realizing that the relationship was negatively affecting her mental and emotional health, Jasmine decided to end the relationship. On January 4, 2021, Jasmine informed Tarak Jat that they had to break up. However, Tarak Jat threatened her that if she left him, he would end his life. The next day, Jasmine saw Tarak Jat watching her from the window during break time, which made her increasingly worried about her safety. Jasmine spoke to Tarak Jat and he again begged her to stay, but she was determined to break up. At this point, Tarak Jat began threatening to harm himself and insisted that Jasmine would be responsible for everything that happened to him. That same night, Jasmine learned that he had taken a large amount of sleeping pills. Jasmine immediately contacted a neighbor of Tarak Jat's in the apartment building, who took Tarak Jat to the hospital. At the hospital, Tarak Jat wrote a letter claiming that he had committed suicide because Jasmine had decided to break up with him, as her family forbade their relationship. The next morning, January 6, 2021, a psychiatrist examined Tarak Jat but found no signs of mental illness. After being discharged from the hospital, Tarak Jat went to Jasmine's house. Tarak Jat said that he needed to talk to Jasmine about an important matter. And Tarak Jat tried to convince Tarak Jat to come back to him. However, this attempt failed again when Jasmine refused. In desperation, Tarak Jat threatened to make public a private video of them to Jasmine's family. Faced with Jasmine's indifference, Tarak Jat eventually sent the video to her mother. Shocked, Jasmine's mother Harpreet Kaur contacted her daughter. Harpreet was furious when she received the video. Tariq Jat then went to Jasmine's workplace the next day. Tariq Jat stood by his car and patiently waited for Jasmine to leave work. Although Jasmine ignored him and left, Tariq Jat followed her in his car, but suddenly stopped, letting Jasmine go home. However, that night, Jasmine could not sleep well. The pressure from Tariq Jat increased and he kept threatening to share her private video with more people if she did not return to him immediately. January 28, 2021. Jasmine could not bear it anymore. She officially reported Tariq Jat's harassment to the police. The police recorded every detail of their relationship. Due to the seriousness of the case, the police conducted an investigation and met Tariq Jat on February 9 to find out the situation. A few days later, Tariq Jat attempted suicide again but was fortunately discovered by a neighbor in time. In the hospital, he explained that he could not face the breakup and asked to be discharged. His request was accepted and he was discharged. However, after being discharged, Tariq Jat began taking medication prescribed by a doctor to treat depression, anxiety, and agitation. But at the same time, thoughts of harming Jasmine became stronger in his mind. On March 4, 2021, Tariq Jat collected information about the locations of most of the surveillance cameras in Adelaide. The next day, Tariq Jat used another phone and left it at home to create an alibi. To avoid detection, Tariq Jat borrowed a neighbor's blue Jeep. On the same day, Tariq Jat went to a hardware store to buy necessary items, including gloves, cable ties, and a shovel. However, Tariq Jat did not know that his every move was monitored and recorded by the store's surveillance camera. Tariq Jat then drove to Jasmine's workplace and waited for her to finish work at around 10 p.m. When she stepped out onto a deserted street, Tariq Jat suddenly attacked, grabbed Jasmine's arm and dragged her into the car. Tariq Jat covered Jasmine's mouth and eyes, tied her hands and feet and drove to a deserted location. He then put her in the boot of the car and continued driving to another city, nearly 400 kilometers away from Adelaide. Along the entire route, from 10:30 p.m. to 3:30 a.m., 5 city surveillance cameras recorded him using the car. When he reached a deserted location, Tariq Jat got out of the car and began digging a shallow grave near the road. Then Tariq Jat opened the trunk of the car and tried to stab Jasmine in the throat with a knife, causing minor injuries. Next, Tariq Jat pushed Jasmine into the grave and began burying her alive. All of this happened in the early hours of March 6. After burying Jasmine, Tariq Jat got back into the car and drove away. Along the way, he discarded Jasmine's belongings along with the remaining rope, tape, and other items. He also discarded his gloves and hood at a location known as the Death Rock. That same day, Jasmine's family became worried when she did not return home. When she failed to show up for work, with no news of Jasmine, her relatives contacted the police and filed the missing person report. During the investigation into Jasmine's disappearance, police reviewed surveillance footage from Jasmine's workplace and discovered surveillance video from the night before showing a man near the building who had been driving toward another city for most of the morning. In an effort to identify the suspect, police issued a public appeal for anyone with information about a man in his 20s who had been in contact with Jasmine or nearby in the days before she went missing. On March 7, police met with Tariq Jat to question him about previous police reports of stalking. Tariq Jat initially denied any involvement in Jasmine's disappearance. However, he later told police that he and Jasmine had argued and she had attempted suicide. Tariq Jat claimed that Jasmine died after she passed out and he buried her in a remote location. Tariq Jat was later arrested and led police to the place where he had buried Jasmine. Jasmine's body was found under 30 centimeters of sand. Jasmine's hands were tied behind her back, her legs were tied with cable ties, and her eyes and mouth were covered. The cut on Jasmine's throat was only a superficial wound. An autopsy was performed. During interrogation, inconsistencies in Tarik Jot's testimony led to his arrest. The autopsy revealed that Jasmine was alive when she was buried and that the cause of death was lack of air. These findings shed light on the horrific nature of the case. On March 8, 2021, Tarik Jot was charged with murder and remanded in pretrial detention. Tarik Jot's first appearance in the Supreme Court was scheduled for March 2022. However, Tarik Jot fell ill. Instead, Tarik Jot's lawyer appeared and pleaded not guilty. The trial was adjourned until February 6, 2023. On February 6, 2023, Tarik Jot publicly admitted in the Adelaide Supreme Court that he had kidnapped Jasmine with the intention of killing her. 5 months later, on July 5, 2023, in the Supreme Court of South Australia, the judge sentenced Tarik Jot to life imprisonment with a non-parole period of 22 years and 10 months. Tarik Jot could be eligible for parole after this period. However, if released, the defendant would have to leave the country. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Rebecca Gould. Rebecca Gould was born on April 28, 1982, in the small town of Melbourne, Kansas, USA, to parents who were going through a divorce. Rebecca, along with her 3 sisters, was raised by her mother but still maintained a relationship with her father. The Gould sisters have a close relationship. They shared a difficult childhood which brought them closer together. Of the sisters, Rebecca and her youngest sister, Danielle, are the closest. In search of a better life and the opportunity to pursue a university education, Rebecca decided to leave her hometown and move to Fayetteville, Arkansas. There, she enrolled in a community college and worked part-time. Danielle also moved to Fayetteville to live with her sister. She helped Rebecca take care of the family and pursue her dream of earning a university degree. One day, during a trip back to her hometown, Rebecca met Casey, whom she noticed and felt something different about. They started dating and gradually fell in love. Although they lived far apart, she and Casey shared beautiful moments together. The relationship between Rebecca and Casey grew stronger. On the morning of September 20, 2004, Rebecca was scheduled to go to Melbourne to pick Casey up from work at a fast food restaurant. After buying coffee and sandwiches, she decided to go back to the mobile home and take a nap before returning to Fayetteville. Meanwhile, Danielle was at Casey's house waiting for Rebecca to pick her up. Rebecca and Danielle had planned for Rebecca to pick Danielle up at noon. However, Danielle tried calling and texting Rebecca but was unable to reach her sister. Danielle then decided to call Rebecca's friends but still did not receive any news. Danielle became increasingly worried. Danielle decided to go to the police station to report Rebecca missing. The police began investigating Rebecca's disappearance by questioning potential witnesses. The first person they chose to question was Casey, the last person to see Rebecca alive. The detectives went to the restaurant where Casey worked and asked him about Rebecca. Casey said that he had slept over at a friend's house and went straight to work the next morning without seeing Rebecca as usual. He assumed Rebecca had left town with Danielle some time ago. Even though Casey had an alibi, the police still felt suspicious of him. They found it strange that he had left his dog alone at home to spend the night at a friend's house. Furthermore, why would he decide to sleep over at a friend's house the night before his girlfriend left? This was one inconsistency in Casey's story that the police noticed. The police thoroughly searched the mobile home where Casey lived and where Rebecca was last seen. They detected a lingering smell of bleach, apparently used to cover up some sort of incident. Rebecca's belongings were still in place, but the bed was in disarray and the sheets were rumpled. One of them showed blood stains. Forensic analysis confirmed that the blood was Rebecca's. Casey immediately became a suspect. However, he had a solid alibi, Several witnesses had seen Rebecca personally driving him to work on Monday morning, and from 8:30 to 4:30, Casey was consistently present at the restaurant. The investigation hit a dead end until a call from a passerby. A week later, a passerby discovered the body of a young girl, brutally mutilated and dumped at the bottom of a shallow ravine outside the city. Police searched the area thoroughly for traces and physical evidence. It was not difficult to identify the murdered girl as Rebecca Gould. She was wearing the same t-shirt and underwear she had been last seen in alive. An autopsy later revealed that her death had occurred about 7 days earlier, on the same Monday, September 20th, when Casey had spent the night at a friend's house. Investigators found signs of brutal beatings on Rebecca's body, including multiple bruises, a broken nose, and a fractured skull. Of particular note were 2 blunt force injuries to the head. These were clearly fatal. The shape of these injuries matched the shape of the missing leg from the piano in Casey's mobile home. Police believed it could have been used as a murder weapon, but they were unable to find it. The details of Rebecca's autopsy revealed the horrific brutality of her killer. In addition to the injuries to her head and neck, she also showed signs of strangulation. A broken hyoid bone indicated a prolonged and brutal strangulation. At the same time, there were no signs of resistance or self-defense, which suggested that the attacker may have been someone she knew and who attacked her from behind. The lack of signs of sexual violence also suggested that rape was not the motive for the murder. Detectives continued to investigate Casey, Rebecca's boyfriend. Several witnesses recalled that Rebecca had talked about wanting to break up with Casey because she was fed up with his constant arguments and controlling behavior. Casey's excessive possessiveness became apparent, especially after Rebecca moved to another city to study. However, Casey's alibi forced the police to look for other leads and suspects. Over time, numerous people connected to Rebecca were investigated, but to no avail. The murder of Rebecca Gould went cold. But in the late 2010s, a surprising breakthrough occurred. A podcast series dedicated to Rebecca's murder caught the attention of a man who claimed to have valuable information about the case. The anonymous witness spoke of a confession he had heard, in which he said he had worked with Casey, the victim's boyfriend, years earlier. At one point, after a few drinks, Casey blurted out that he had killed Rebecca. The witness said that Casey confessed to the crime when he was drunk. However, what was suspicious was that the witness had remained silent for many years and only spoke up when his relationship with Casey became strained. Investigators initially viewed the witness's testimony with skepticism. They suspected that the man's testimony was just a way to get revenge and frame Casey. However, they could not dismiss the testimony either. They decided to continue investigating and look for more evidence. After more than a month of investigation, the detectives still had not found enough evidence to charge Casey. However, they felt that the solution was somewhere nearby. They decided to focus on people related to Casey. Particular attention was paid to William Miller, Casey's cousin, who had arrived in town before the murders. At first, William seemed like a minor character, but as the detectives reconstructed the events, his role in the case began to become clearer. William had left the United States after the murder and moved to the Philippines. This made the detectives suspicious. However, since the Philippines did not have an extradition treaty with the United States, interrogating William became impossible. The detectives could only hope that William would return to the United States and come to their attention. Meanwhile, they found some information on social media. William had joined a discussion group about the case and started commenting on posts. He described the area where the mutilated body was found with surprising accuracy. William's behavior raised suspicions. The detectives felt that they were getting closer to solving the case, but they still needed to find more evidence to be able to charge William. Why would someone who had lived on the other side of the world for years suddenly become so absorbed in the details of a tragedy that happened so long ago? Moreover, William's accurate description of the details of the case is almost astonishing. William Miller found his way back to the United States 16 years after Rebecca Gould's disappearance. Investigators finally had the opportunity to ask him some important questions. The police had previously tried to contact him because of a tip from the community. They suspected that he might have a connection to Rebecca. Investigators began by asking him about his life, especially his time in the Philippines. William made no secret of the fact that he was wealthy. He owned a spacious farm with a family and animals. During the conversation, he also talked about his relationship with Casey. He denied seeing Casey the night before Rebecca disappeared, but he also accidentally revealed that he witnessed an argument between Casey and Rebecca. Investigators felt that he had important information that he could not share because of legal restrictions. William reluctantly added that he never saw Rebecca again, dead or alive. This statement became an important clue for the police, as they realized that information about Rebecca's death had not been made public, making William's knowledge suspicious. Investigators decided to employ a trick to test William. They brought photos of William's car taken in 2004 into the interrogation room and claimed that there was blood on the gas pedal, matching Rebecca Gould's. Upon hearing this, William became nervous and began to fumble his testimony. He gave several implausible versions of events, including seeing a stranger in a white van near Casey's mobile home and accidentally witnessing a robbery. These bizarre stories only reinforced the impression that William had something to hide. Finally, William announced he was ready to tell the whole truth. He recounted that on the morning of September 20th, 2004, he had gone hunting and stopped by Casey's mobile home to borrow a cell phone. Rebecca, who was inside, sensed no danger and opened the door for William. William suddenly lunged at Rebecca, knocking her to the ground and began beating her with his fists and random objects. He took a broken piano leg and repeatedly struck the defenseless Rebecca over the head. To ensure she was dead, William strangled her with a pair of tights he found in the room. After killing Rebecca, William wrapped her body in a suitcase, mopped the bloody floor, stuffed the blankets and sheets in the washing machine, and turned the mattress upside down to hide the evidence. He took Rebecca's body out of town and threw it into the nearest ravine. Investigators listening to this bizarre confession were haunted by a simple question: why? What drove this seemingly respectable family man to commit such a terrible crime? William swore he had no intention of raping Rebecca and that there was no romantic or sexual relationship between them. He had not robbed her and had no personal grievances or grudges. The reason, he said, was a spontaneous rage at the weakness he sensed in Rebecca. Rebecca had not said anything offensive or done anything wrong. She was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. For years, William Miller had boasted about his crimes and taunted the police. Joining the online group became a gain for him, a chance to prove his superiority over the law once again. However, was Rebecca Gould Williams' only victim? This became the central question for the detectives. In order to find out more information, they resorted to a ruse. They thought this could help them discover the truth. When they told William that they knew of other murders with a method similar to Rebecca's, William began to cry and beg for mercy. He then revealed a series of new details about his crimes, which horrified the detectives. According to William, he was not just a lone killer but a true maniac. At least 5 lives were lost at his hands. The victims were mostly young women, including prostitutes and hitchhikers. William would pick them up on the highway, lure them to deserted places, and then brutally murder them. William did not rape these women. Instead, he derived pleasure from the killing process itself. He watched the life fade from the eyes of his captives, savoring their terror and despair. Then, he would strangle them with their clothes. The detectives listened attentively to William's confession, feeling horrified. They realized that they had encountered a living serial killer, which could help them solve many cases. However, the detectives also questioned the authenticity of William's confession. To verify the information, they asked William to provide more details about the victims and where they were buried. William provided some information, but it was not detailed enough. He gave some descriptions of the victims, but did not provide specific information about the locations or dates of the murders. In the end, the detectives relied on a rough map that William had marked with some of the possible locations where the victims' remains might be found. William's testimony was still valuable. The detectives knew that they had months, if not years, of hard work and careful examination ahead. They would have to search for missing bodies, compare DNA, and identify the victims. The most important thing was that William would eventually go to prison and never be able to hurt anyone again. William had revealed too many details that only the killer would know. His testimony matched the autopsy results and the circumstances of the crime scene perfectly. In November 2022, more than 5 years after William Miller was arrested, the case finally came to a close. William was charged with the premeditated murder of Rebecca Gould. However, investigators did not have enough evidence to charge him with other crimes. The court decided to focus on the 16-year-old murder case. The prosecutor argued that a life sentence was appropriate for William. They believed that he was no longer a human being but a killer who posed a direct threat to society. The prosecutor believed that if William were released, even for a day, he would surely commit more crimes. In contrast to the prosecutor, William's lawyers emphasized that he was not responsible for his actions because of his mental illness. They urged the jury to sympathize with their client and allow him to be treated in an appropriate psychiatric facility. In the end, the court convicted William Miller of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to 40 years in prison, with the possibility of parole in 25 years. If William were released, he would be 72 years old. The verdict shocked the people of Melbourne. Many protested that the sentence was too lenient. In their view, a person who committed such a crime did not deserve parole. Some argued that the investigation had watered down the crime and weakened the case to avoid affecting the clearance rate. Ultimately, William's conviction automatically cleared Casey, who many townspeople considered the real killer. Despite the skepticism and outrage, the fact remains that one of the most famous and mysterious murders in Melbourne's history has finally been solved. The real killer, a serial killer and psychopath, was imprisoned, not for life, but long enough to protect society from further victims. While not all the mysteries were solved, Rebecca's family finally knew the truth. They could begin to heal their emotional wounds. Months have passed since William Miller's arrest, and life in Melbourne is slowly returning to normal. Rebecca Gould's family is trying to come to terms with their grief. Her mother has found the strength to visit her daughter's grave for the first time in years. Her father has also opened her childhood toys and photo albums, which have been hidden in the attic for a long time. Rebecca's sisters have grown up and are trying to make up for lost time, calling each other regularly to share their grief. Rebecca's best friend, Casey, has decided to stay in Melbourne. He feels he must prove that he can build a new life despite the pain and loss he has experienced. He rarely visits the old mobile home, which holds so many painful memories. But when he gets the chance, he brings white roses to the door, Rebecca's favorite flower. William Miller, who caused pain to Rebecca's family, seems to have accepted his fate in prison. He behaves quietly, trying not to attract undue attention. He willingly communicates with a psychiatrist and takes prescribed medication. However, from time to time, a strange smile flashes across his face, as if reflecting something dark that has long been hidden under a mask of kindness. This story is a testament to the inevitability of justice. Sometimes it seems that evil is winning and criminals are getting away with it, but in reality, it is not. Sooner or later, punishment comes to all those who have crossed the line of humanity, and when it does, there is no turning back, only bitterness, loneliness, and the burden of guilt to carry to the end. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Lauren Heike. Lauren Heike was born on November 20th, 1993, in Seattle, Washington, to a well-off family. Her father, Jeff, owned a plumbing manufacturing business, and her mother, Lana, worked in real estate. Lauren was close to her older brother, Ryan. She attended Central Kitsap High School in Silverdale, Washington. After graduating, Lauren moved to Phoenix and enrolled at the Gary Manuel Lida Institute to study cosmetology and skin care. Lauren took great care of herself and had a good understanding of cosmetics. Lauren started her career at 18 years old and achieved significant success. She initially spent 5 years, from 2015 onwards, working as a customer support representative. She then became a leading manager at Benefit, a renowned cosmetics company. Next, she worked as a cosmetologist at a beauty salon for 9 months. In October 2020, Lauren got a job as a manager at an aesthetic medicine center. Additionally, she had aspirations to pursue a career in real estate, following in her mother's footsteps. At the time of the tragedy, Lauren was working full-time as an instructor at a golf club. Lauren was a confident and responsible individual who thrived in multiple areas, including the beauty industry, sports, and real estate. She made her physical health a top priority and led a healthy, active lifestyle. With a strong support system of friends and family, which allowed her to make the most of her leisure time by doing things she loved, such as traveling, going on hikes, and spending time with others. One of her favorite pastimes was walking alone, immersed in music and nature, savoring the fresh air, silence, and tranquility. Her preferred route was a secluded path in the northern part of Phoenix, close to her apartment. Lauren's parents worried about her walking alone in empty areas, but she felt sure she was safe. Lauren began each day with a consistent routine, waking up, drinking coffee, chatting with loved ones and friends, and embarking on her daily walk. She believes these things help her start her day on a positive note. However, Lauren has no idea that her gullible and carefree nature will put her in danger. On April 28, 2023, Lauren started her morning routine as usual. She had coffee, chatted with family and friends on the phone, and went for a walk in a quiet area near her apartment in northern Phoenix. The scenic trail took around 15 to 30 minutes to walk one way. Lauren left her apartment at around 10:30 a.m. Surveillance cameras last captured her walking calmly on the trail at 10:52 a.m., wearing a pink sports top, black leggings, and sneakers, with only her phone and keys on her. After that, she was not seen again. Lauren was expected at work at 11:30 a.m. but failed to show up, which was unusual for someone so responsible. Her colleagues tried calling her, but her phone was turned off. This worried Lauren's friends, who shared messages on social media and called each other to find information about Lauren's location. However, no one had any news, and Lauren had not been seen after leaving her apartment that morning. At about 1 p.m., Lauren's worried parents went to her apartment because they couldn't get in touch with her. They thought maybe she wasn't feeling well and that's why she didn't go to work. But Lauren wasn't there either. All her belongings were still in place, the doors were locked, and nothing suggested there had been a break-in or a struggle. It looked like she had gone out for a walk and just hadn't come back. After that, Lauren's relatives immediately filed a missing person report with the police. The authorities reacted swiftly and initiated a search, but unfortunately, they did not get any results. The park where Lauren went for a walk was almost deserted. If someone had been passing by when the attack occurred, the tragedy might have been prevented. However, that was not the case. Lauren was last seen walking alone towards the park, and then she disappeared, no longer responding to calls. Throughout the day, the police and volunteers thoroughly searched the surrounding area, the park, and looked for potential witnesses. They meticulously combed every corner and every bush but found nothing. Lauren's loved ones held on to the hope that she might have simply wandered off, got delayed, or visited friends in another part of the city. Lauren's relatives kept calling and texting her, but still didn't know where she was. As the hours passed, their hopes dwindled, and their fear for Lauren's life grew. Her parents, brother, and friends were beside themselves with worry. The following morning, April 29th, was like a terrible nightmare. At around 11 o'clock, the worst happened. A woman walking her dog stumbled upon Lauren's body. She recognized Lauren because she often walked her dog on that route and had seen Lauren before. The dog sensed something was wrong, and the woman saw Lauren's bloody body. She immediately called the police. Police arrived instantly at the scene to a horrific sight. Lauren's body was found 3 meters off the trail, concealed in a thicket with numerous stab wounds. She lay face up with outstretched arms, her clothes torn, and blood was everywhere. Experts began working immediately, with the forensic medical examiner determining that Lauren died on April 28 at approximately 11 a.m. due to blood loss from deep knife wounds. A total of 15 stab wounds were found on Lauren's body, likely inflicted with a pocket knife. The wound in her back area was fatal. The nature of the wounds indicated that the attack and murder lasted for some time, as they were in different parts of her body, varying in depth and shape. The injuries on Lauren's hands showed she had resisted, with deep cuts on both sides of her hands from trying to deflect the sharp knife. Police realized Lauren fought to the end, but her attacker was aggressive and strong. The attack was unexpected, and scratches on her back, shoulders, and torn clothing indicated the suspect attacked from behind, knocking her down and stabbing her with a knife. He then turned her over and continued to strike. At the crime scene, investigators found a clear footprint from a size 42 to 43 sneaker, likely belonging to the attacker. The area showed signs of a struggle, with Lauren attempting to crawl away and hide in nearby bushes. However, she was unable to escape, and bloodstains were found stretching several meters from the scene, ending near her body. It appeared that Lauren fought for her life and called for help, but unfortunately, she was alone in the deserted park at that early hour with no one nearby to assist her. Near the body, a barbed wire fence was discovered, which Lauren seemed to have desperately tried to climb over. Torn clothing and blood were found on the wire, suggesting that her attempt to overcome the fence resulted in the numerous scratches and abrasions on her body. Lauren's phone and house keys were found nearby, having fallen from her pockets during the struggle. Her phone was broken, with the last calls made on the evening of April 27th, indicating that no one had heard from her for over a day. Further examination of the area revealed a bloody pocket knife among the branches a few meters from the crime scene, providing another crucial piece of evidence. Experts quickly identified the object as the likely murder weapon. Further analysis of the blade and handle uncovered fingerprints and DNA traces from an unidentified male. Investigators also collected hair and skin cells from the killer at the crime scene. Lauren's body, along with all physical evidence, was promptly sent for forensic examination. Meanwhile, investigators reviewed the surveillance camera footage from the park. They found that one camera captured Lauren entering the park at 10:52, walking alone and listening to music on her headphones, without anything seeming out of the ordinary. However, just 1 minute later, a tall, thin man in dark clothing appeared on the recording, quickly passing by the camera as if attempting to conceal his face. Despite the man's efforts to hide, experts were able to make out that he was a young African-American male wearing a cap. Notably, his height, build, skin color, and clothing matched the description of the individual whose traces were discovered at the crime scene. Another camera, positioned at the park exit, recorded the same man rushing out from around the corner at 10:59, looking around frantically. He then tried to climb over the fence but got his clothes caught, ultimately jumping over and losing his cap in the process. The investigation gained its first lead from records showing the suspect disappearing in an unknown direction. Although the perpetrator's identity couldn't be immediately established, the police now had an accurate description and distinguishing features to work with. Notably, the unknown man appeared in the park around the same time Lauren was murdered, according to preliminary findings. The cameras captured footage of the killer before and after the crime. A detailed analysis of the footage revealed more information. The suspect moved with purpose, glancing around as if fearful of being seen. He appeared in the park about 30 to 40 seconds after Lauren did, suggesting he was following her. After committing the crime, the perpetrator fled the scene in the opposite direction of the park entrance, scaling a fence to escape quickly. This behavior supports the theory that the murder was premeditated and possibly not his first offense. The killer acted swiftly and boldly, attempting to avoid leaving evidence behind. However, in their haste, they made mistakes that allowed them to be partially captured on camera. Despite being shown footage from the cameras, Lauren's parents and friends were unable to identify the man in the video. The tragedy left everyone shocked and deeply saddened. Lauren's loved ones don't understand why someone could so cruelly take the life-kind and energetic girl. Lauren had no enemies, was not involved in any conflicts, and did not owe anyone money. Additionally, she did not own anything that was worth a significant amount. Her lifestyle is extremely healthy. As a result, the possibilities of revenge or robbery were quickly ruled out. A week after the murder, a press conference was held where police officers shared the evidence they had gathered and appealed to the public for help in identifying the suspect. Lauren's father, clearly distraught, pleaded with anyone who had information to come forward help and assist law enforcement. In response, Lauren's relatives offered a substantial reward for any information that could help identify the killer. The case sent shockwaves throughout the city, prompting thousands of people to take action by sharing information on social media, organizing search parties, and volunteering. Meanwhile, investigators continued to analyze physical evidence. Forensic experts carefully examined DNA, fingerprints, and other biological evidence in a laboratory. Eventually, they got a break in the case. The suspect's genetic profile matched a record in the police database, which identified Zion William Teasley, a 22-year-old African-American with a history of crime. Detectives promptly began to investigate Teasley's background. Their inquiry revealed that Teasley was raised in a troubled home. His parents struggled with addiction. Teasley had a criminal record from a young age, with offenses including theft, public disorder, and intimidation. In 2020, he was convicted of committing several armed robberies. As a result, Teasley spent almost a year incarcerated, but his sentence was reduced due to positive behavior, allowing him to be released early. Teasley's most recent arrest occurred in January 2023 for a knife attack on a bystander, but the charges were dropped when the victim withdrew their statement, resulting in Teasley receiving a suspended sentence. At the time of Lauren's murder, the suspect was under police supervision, requiring him to regularly report to the precinct. His last check-in occurred on April 27th, the day before the tragic incident in the park. Upon learning this, detectives started devising a plan to apprehend Teasley, placing him under 24-hour surveillance. It was discovered that Teasley was unemployed and spent most of his time at home, occasionally visiting the store or meeting with suspicious individuals. Having obtained an arrest warrant, police visited Teasley's apartment, breaking down the door to gain entry. However, they found no one inside. The search uncovered a bucket of chlorine, gloves, and rags, indicating Teasley's likely intention to eliminate evidence. Teasley's room contained a packed suitcase and a new passport in a different name, along with bus tickets to Canada, suggesting a plan to escape the country. The investigation led detectives to believe Teasley was aware of the search and aimed to evade justice. A massive search operation was launched. Information about Teasley was sent to all states, and border agents were instructed to apprehend the suspect. Surveillance systems have been enhanced at railway stations, airports, and highways. By tracking calls from Teasley's phone and analyzing cell tower signals, detectives sought to pinpoint his location. Concurrently, they collected more evidence, including accounts from witnesses who spotted Teasley following Lauren the day before the murder. Another witness stated that they saw him in the same park 2 days prior to the tragic incident. A thorough investigation into Teasley's past revealed a disturbing pattern of violent behavior towards women. Just a month prior to Lauren's murder, he was detained for harassing a woman at a nightclub. Furthermore, a former girlfriend had previously filed a complaint against him for physical abuse, although the case was ultimately dropped due to insufficient evidence. It is clear that Teasley was an extremely unstable and aggressive man with a deep hatred of women, whom he considered inferior. Teasley's social media posts were discovered, where he used derogatory language towards women. Photographs were found featuring knives that bore a striking resemblance to the murder weapon at the scene. Authorities suggested that Lauren may have been a random victim of Teasley's violent tendencies. Lauren's family were shocked and couldn't understand why someone would be so heartless and cruel. Their daughter had simply gone for a walk and was brutally murdered for no reason. Lauren's father made a heartfelt plea to the public, begging them not to seek revenge themselves. He wants people to let the police handle the situation and punish the perpetrators through the law, instead of using mob violence. After a 3-day search, Teasley was apprehended in an abandoned garage on the city's outskirts. During the arrest, he resisted and injured a police officer. During questioning, Teasley was uncooperative, claiming he had committed no crime and had never seen Lauren before. He later denied being in the park that day, but fell silent when shown surveillance footage, and he requested a lawyer. The prosecutor promptly charged Teasley with intentional murder and kidnapping, citing substantial evidence, surveillance videos, Lauren's belongings found in the garage, a knife, DNA, and fingerprints from the crime scene. The court ordered Teasley to be held without bail. Teasley's trial began on June 5, 2023, and was one of the most high-profile cases in state history, drawing widespread national attention. Journalists and members of the public who were concerned about the issue assembled in front of the courthouse. Everyone in the courtroom was to catch a glimpse of the person responsible for the horrific murder. Teasley, the defendant, was led in wearing handcuffs and an orange prison robe, his expression eerily indifferent. In stark contrast, Lauren's family was overcome with heartache. Her mother sobbed uncontrollably, while her father glared at Teasley with anger and hatred. The prosecutor gave a powerful and emotional speech, portraying Teasley as a ruthless killer who posed a significant threat to society. He stressed how brutally the crime was committed and the overwhelming evidence against Teasley. Prosecutors described Teasley as a psychopath who enjoyed inflicting pain on women, driven by a deep-seated hatred for them. Conversely, Teasley's defense attorney sought to prove his client's innocence. He challenged the evidence, arguing that it was possible another individual was responsible for Lauren's death. The defense urged the jury to remain impartial, to focus solely on the facts and not be swayed by public opinion or emotions. Teasley is currently charged with first-degree murder. In December 2023, the Maricopa County Prosecutor's Office requested the death penalty, the most severe punishment allowed by Arizona law for such a serious crime. The Phoenix Police Department has completed their investigation, and the suspect will face prosecution. However, Teasley maintains his innocence despite the charges. He remains in custody without bail. The trial is expected to take place in October 2025 and will be one of the most high-profile cases in Arizona history. Lauren's tragic death shocked the nation and devastated her loved ones. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Jayden Parkinson. Jayden Parkinson, born on September 26, 1996 in Folkestone, United Kingdom, Jayden is the youngest of 3 children. Her parents had a strained relationship. Family problems led to her parents' divorce when Jayden was only 7 years old. Jayden lives with her father. Although Jayden lives with her father, the relationship with her mother Samantha Shuri remains strong. Jayden and her mother talk on the phone every night. As Jayden entered her teenage years, her life became increasingly unstable. Her father often ignored her. She began smoking and drinking, and spent time living with both parents. At the age of 13, Jayden ran away from her father's house and moved in with her mother, eventually winning a court order allowing her to stay there. Jayden was in a relationship with Ben Blakely, whom she met at the age of 14. Blakely had a profound influence on her, gradually changing her over time. Jayden was 15 when she started dating Ben, 20. The significant age gap worried Jayden's mother, but she couldn't stop her daughter from falling in love. Initially, their relationship was loving and romantic, but it gradually deteriorated over time. And their relationship became increasingly strained. Ben controlled every aspect of Jayden's life. She stopped wearing makeup and became increasingly withdrawn. He dictated what clothes she wore and isolated her from family and friends. As a result, Jayden moved out of her mother's house and into a shelter for women who were victims of domestic violence. Although the shelter's rules forbade Ben from visiting, he continued to exert complete control over Jayden's life. Jayden and Ben frequently had arguments, and at one point, Jayden even warned the hostel staff about Ben's aggressive behavior towards her. Ben exerted significant control over Jayden, dictating her every move and restricting her freedom. He took away her mobile phone, convincing her that she didn't need anything else as long as she had him. Ben also prohibited her from interacting with men and monitored her social media activity. As a result, Jayden stopped attending school. Jayden's communication with her mother, which was once a daily occurrence, dwindled to just 1 or 2 conversations per month. Her mother, Samantha, urged Jayden to return home and end the relationship with Ben, but Jayden refused. Ben's control over Jayden was both psychological and physical, and where Jayden was seen with visible bruises on her face. On November 30, 2013, Jayden announced to her mother that she was pregnant. Hoping to change Ben, she believed that the baby would bring positive changes to their relationship and his lifestyle. Jayden envisioned the baby would bring them closer together, and that Ben would return to the caring person she first met. Unfortunately, Ben has not changed. Once Ben gained complete control over Jayden, his true nature emerged. He isolated her from friends and family, leaving her financially dependent on him. The situation escalated to the point where Jayden was confined to her room, even restricted from using the bathroom without permission. Unbeknownst to Jayden, Ben was secretly dating other women, exerting the same manipulative control over them. Samantha learned about her daughter Jayden's pregnancy and asked her to come home, but Jayden declined, not wanting to cause her mother more trouble. When Jayden told her Ben about the pregnancy, he became enraged and denied being the father. He even threatened to post intimate photos and videos of Jayden on social media. Fearing Ben would follow through on his threat, Jayden reported him to the police a few days before she went missing. Ben had around 30 explicit photos and 13 videos of Jayden, which she desperately wanted to keep private. On December 3rd, Jayden failed to return to her hostel for the night. Knowing about the problems in Jayden's life, the police tried to find her, but were unsuccessful. They contacted Jayden's mother Samantha by phone, but she did not know where Jayden was. On December 4th, 2013, police received a report that Jayden was missing. Police contacted Jayden's boyfriend, Ben, to see if he had any information about her disappearance. However, Ben was uncooperative and hung up several times, claiming that he did not know where Jayden was, Jayden having run away from home several times before, so her initial disappearance didn't raise immediate concerns. The next day, Ben was arrested and taken to the police station, but not in connection with Jayden's disappearance. The arrest was due to a report that Jayden had filed a few days earlier, stating that she feared Ben would post private photos of her online. The police questioned Ben. Ben denied any intention to post the photos and was released on bail the same day. Samantha distributed flyers with Jayden's picture. In addition to distributing flyers, she also used social media platforms to publicize Jayden's disappearance, hoping to get clues for the case. The police analyzed security footage. They collected surveillance camera footage from the motel where Jayden lived. The footage showed the girl going out to meet Ben but, then, did not return to her residence. On December 3rd, Jayden was seen again at Oxford railway station. Surveillance footage captured her walking inside with Ben, and nothing unusual occurred in the video. After tracking their movements, police discovered that Ben and Jayden had taken the train to Didcot, a town about 10 miles from Oxford. Jayden's last known location was the railway station in Didcot, where the footage showed her and Ben leaving the building. In the past, whenever Jayden ran away, she would usually contact her family within a day or two to let them know she was safe. This time, however, was different. Jayden had not contacted her family or friends, and there was no activity on her social media accounts. After reviewing surveillance camera footage showing Jayden boarding the train with Ben, he became the prime suspect in her disappearance. Police were certain that Ben knew where Jayden was and what had happened to her. The footage revealed that Ben returned to the train station alone, and there was no further sighting of Jayden. 1 week later, on December 10, 2013, Ben Blakely was arrested by the police. Police wanted to question Ben to find out what happened to Jayden after they left the train station in Didcot together. At that point, the police had not ruled out the possibility that Jayden might be hiding of her own free will or that Ben might be holding her. During the interrogation, Ben displayed confidence. He claimed to have no knowledge of Jayden's whereabouts. According to Ben, he and Jayden had broken up, and she was now in a relationship with someone else. Ben suggested that the police should focus on speaking with Jayden's new boyfriend, as he believed this person might have more information about her disappearance. Ben appeared indifferent to Jayden's situation, saying that the fact that they had broken up and Ben had a new girlfriend made her situation irrelevant to him. He suggested that the police check Jayden's social media accounts to gather information about her recent activities and interactions. Ben Blakely was arrested on suspicion of kidnapping and murder, despite Jayden still being missing. The police interviewed Jayden's friends to see if she might have gone to a safe location, but they found out that Jayden had distanced herself from her friends after she started dating Ben. As a result, no one knew if she had a place to hide. During the search for Jayden, a taxi driver from Didcot provided vital information to the police. On December 4th, at around 1 a.m., the taxi driver picked up a passenger on a dirt road. The passenger, a young man with a large, heavy suitcase covered in mud, needed help lifting the suitcase into the taxi. The taxi driver became suspicious and wondered if he had accidentally witnessed a crime. The investigation revealed that the person who called the taxi was Ben Blakely's mobile phone. When questioned further, Ben refused to answer any further questions. Analysis of his phone location records showed that Ben had visited a number of locations in Didcot, including a disused rural shed where a taxi had picked him up that night. A team of police officers and sniffer dogs searched the shed as part of the investigation. It was also discovered that Ben and Jayden had visited the shed earlier. Police found a bracelet matching Jayden's near the scene. Trained sniffer dogs indicated the presence of a body inside the shed, but Jayden's body was not found. This led police to suspect a large suitcase was involved when Ben got into the taxi. Police have appealed to the public for assistance, asking anyone who saw a man carrying a large suitcase in rural Didcot to come forward. Meanwhile, officers have conducted interviews at nearby homes to gather more information. Footage from the train station showed that Ben and Jayden were not carrying suitcases, which led police to wonder where Ben got the suitcases. It is also possible that the man described by the taxi driver was not Ben. On December 14th, police discovered that Ben Blakely's grandmother, grandfather, and younger brother Jake lived near the abandoned warehouse. When police visited Ben's grandmother, she later explained that Ben had taken a suitcase from her a few days earlier. He had arrived in a hurry, dumped the contents of the suitcase on the floor, and left without explanation. Ben's grandmother said he returned home 2 days after Jayden went missing and threw his mountain bike into the shed. However, the bike was dirty when he returned. She also reported that 2 shovels were missing, only to reappear later, covered in a thick layer of dirt. The presence of the 2 shovels raised questions about Ben's intentions and the potential involvement of an accomplice. Notably, Ben and his younger brother Jake Blakely, 17, were also acquaintances of Jayden. Witnesses reported seeing Ben and Jake riding mountain bikes together. As the investigation began, police found sufficient cause to suspect Jake of being involved in the crime and subsequently arrested him. The suitcase that Ben had returned to his grandmother's barn was sent to a laboratory for analysis to determine if it contained Jayden's DNA. Based on the available evidence, police developed a theory that Jayden was killed in an abandoned barn, then placed in the suitcase and moved to another location for burial. However, searching for Jayden's body in the vast field surrounding Didcot seemed challenging. To help narrow down the search area, the police used aviation to aid in the investigation and estimate the likely location of Jayden's burial site. Through aerial photography, police identified 10 locations with significant recent changes in soil surface. The police initially examined several sites but found no leads on Jayden's body. Before they could inspect all 10 locations, a new lead emerged when Jake Blakely began cooperating with police. He directed them to check his uncle's grave at a local cemetery in Didcot, near All Saints Church. This cemetery was one of the original 10 locations, although it was considered a low priority due to the common occurrence of soil changes in cemeteries. Police secured the cemetery after receiving information from Jake Blakely, who suggested that Jayden's body might be buried in his uncle's grave. This method of concealment had never been seen by police before. Jake and Ben's uncle reportedly died in 2006. The new developments in the case have attracted widespread media attention, as this is the first case in the country where a victim's body was concealed in an existing grave. A tent was set up in the cemetery to facilitate a forensic examination. Following this setup, Jayden's family received devastating news. Her body had been found in the grave of Ben and Jake Blakely's uncle. The body was found without clothes, and no jewelry was present. Forensic experts discovered evidence that Jayden had been severely beaten before her death. Specifically, her neck showed signs of strangulation, which was confirmed as the cause of death by the pathologist, with asphyxia being the official cause. While in prison awaiting trial, Ben Blakely changed his defense strategy, and he and his attorney drafted a confession letter stating that Ben was indeed responsible for Jayden's death. However, he maintained that the act was not intentional. According to his testimony, a heated argument led him to push Jayden, causing her to fall from a bridge near an abandoned warehouse. Ben tried to revive Jayden but was unsuccessful. He initially buried her in another location. He then moved the body to the cemetery, where it was buried in his uncle's grave. However, the autopsy results contradicted his story. There was no evidence that she had fallen, but instead, her face showed signs of blunt force trauma. The official cause of death was asphyxiation by strangulation, suggesting that Ben's story was not true. Ben Blakely was trying to reduce his guilt in Jaden's death. Jaden's father passed away due to heart problems before the trial started. On June 23, 2014, Ben Blakely was in court, and it became clear that he showed no regret for his actions. His behavior was provocative and aggressive, revealing his indifference to taking the life of Jaden and her unborn child. During the 4-week trial, it was revealed that Ben Blakely from Reading, Berks, had a history of being a violent and controlling partner. 3 of his previous girlfriends testified against him, sharing their experiences of being in abusive relationships with him. They reported that he would confiscate their phones, physical assault them, and even grab them by the throat if they responded back or if he suspected them of cheating. Throughout the trial, Ben received multiple warnings from the judge for using profanity in the dock and on the witness stand, where he repeatedly shouted at the prosecutor, Richard Leam. His outbursts were so intense that Jaden's mother and other family members were forced to leave the courtroom in tears on multiple occasions. The judge, Patrick Eccles, was also pushed to his limits. He ordered Ben Blakely to be taken to the cells to continue the trial without him. Jake Blakely, who was under 18 at the time, said he had no idea what was inside the suitcase and thought he was burying weapons or dead animals. He was persuaded by his brother, Ben, who promised him an Xbox console and $100 in exchange for carrying out the mission. The prosecutor alleged that the crime was premeditated, suggesting that Ben Blakely intentionally took Jaden to a secluded location where he could commit the crime without being seen. It is believed that Blakely's actions were driven by a desire to control Jaden's life, which was disrupted by her pregnancy and her desire to start anew. Ben Blakely, who did not want to become a father. Jaden's mother, Samantha Shrewsbury, has spoken out in support of creating a domestic violence registry. In an interview with Sky News, she expressed her desire to prevent other families from experiencing similar tragedies. She recalled the traumatic experience of identifying her daughter's body and stated that the memory would haunt her forever. In the year leading up to Jaden's death, Samantha believed that Jaden was the target of Ben's abuse. Samantha remembers an incident where Ben came to Samantha's apartment building the day after he verbally and physically abused Jaden. He managed to enter the building and banged on the door, demanding to see Jaden. Samantha refused to let him in, and in response, he spat on Samantha before leaving. That same day, Jaden went outside to smoke, and unfortunately, Ben found her. Samantha did not see or hear from Jaden for the next 2 weeks. During that time, Samantha assumed that Jaden had gone to Ben's house. As a result, it became difficult to contact Jaden because Ben had destroyed her phone or SIM card. Despite his horrific behavior, which included burning, beating, and starving Jaden, Ben remained in denial about his true nature. The jury deliberated for 20 hours before returning their verdict. Ben Blakely was found guilty of willfully murdering Jaden Parkinson. The judge told Ben Blakely that he took 17-year-old Jaden Parkinson to a remote area near Upton, where he strangled her to death. The judge also noted that Ben's behavior towards Jaden was marked by irrational jealousy, physical abuse, and emotional manipulation throughout their relationship. The judge found that Ben Blakely had taken control of Jaden's daily life. To isolate her, he took away her phone and restricted her movements while she was in the boarding house, even to the point of not allowing her to use the toilet, forcing her to urinate in plastic bottles. Despite Ben's abusive behavior, Jaden fought to leave him. Jaden finally found the courage to end their relationship last November. Ben threatened to share intimate photos of the two of them publicly. The court sentenced Ben Blakely, who was sentenced to life in prison for attempted murder. Ben's younger brother, Jake Blakely, was sentenced to 3 years in prison for perverting the course of justice. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Rebecca Payne. Rebecca Payne was born on April 19, 1986, in New Milford, Connecticut, to Virginia and Nicholas Payne. She was their only child. Rebecca attended New Milford High School, graduating in 2004. During her high school years, she was an active athlete. After high school, Rebecca enrolled in Northeastern University in Boston, where she pursued a degree in athletic training. This 5-year program focused on the care and prevention of athletic injuries. In her 4th year, Rebecca held leadership positions, including a spot on the Dean's Council and serving as president of the Athletic Training Club. She played a key role in organizing the university's vision for the Future Athletic Training Leadership Forum and was also involved with the Episcopal Lutheran Center. Rebecca was known for her friendly and approachable nature. She had a large circle of friends and was always willing to lend a helping hand. At 6:30 a.m. on May 20, 2008, Boston police received a call from the manager of the Parker Hill apartment complex. The man was in a panic. He told the police that he had seen a door ajar in a 3rd-floor apartment. A 22-year-old student, Rebecca Payne, lived in the apartment. When he knocked on the door and called her name, no one answered him. And he decided to go inside. There, he immediately saw dark red spots and stripes on the floor that led him to one of the rooms. He found Rebecca lying on the floor, with no signs of life and her belongings scattered. When police arrived at the crime scene, they observed that the front door showed no signs of forced entry, suggesting that Rebecca may have known her attacker and may have let herself in willingly. Her 3rd-floor apartment had 2 bedrooms, and Rebecca's body was found face down on the floor in the bedroom. A trail of blood led from the living room to the bedroom, suggesting that the attack occurred in the living room, as there were traces of shell casings in that room. Forensic examinations showed that Rebecca had been shot 5 times. Blood stains in the apartment suggested that she had been conscious for some time, attempting to crawl to the bedroom before losing strength. Her valuables were still there. The state of disarray in her apartment was suspicious, leading police to believe that the perpetrator may have deliberately created the mess to distract them. Additionally, the mess may have been caused by Rebecca's struggle for life. When they searched the apartment, police observed that both the balcony door and the front door were open. Signs in the 2nd bedroom suggested that someone else had been living there. Identifying this person became a top priority for the police, as they were likely Rebecca's killer. After speaking with the apartment manager, police discovered that Rebecca lived with another student in her apartment, prompting police to begin searching for the student. At the same time, police interviewed residents of Parker Hill Apartments, some of whom reported hearing a woman scream and gunshots between 3 and 4 a.m. Unfortunately, no one reported the incident to the police. Rebecca Payne's tragic death left her parents reeling, not only from the loss of their daughter, but also from the appalling indifference of their neighbors. Despite hearing Rebecca's screams and gunshots, no one called for help. Rebecca's parents described her as a vibrant and compassionate young woman. She had a big heart and was known for putting others before herself, always looking to help those in need. In the aftermath of her death, police interviewed residents of the apartment complex where Rebecca lived. One man, who lived on the 1st floor, reported seeing a black SUV approach the building at night. However, due to the darkness, he was unable to see the car's license plates or identify who got out of the vehicle. The apartment building where the crime took place had both internal and external surveillance cameras. However, when police asked the building manager for the footage, they discovered that the cameras only allowed for real-time viewing. The outdated equipment required a video cassette to be inserted into a VCR and manually recorded, but no one had done so. Given this information, along with the fact that the manager was the one who found Rebecca's body, police began to suspect him of the crime. As a resident of the building, he had constant access to Rebecca's apartment and was aware that the surveillance cameras were not being monitored. The suspicion against the manager grew when a background check revealed his past run-ins with the law, specifically related to prohibited substances. Furthermore, an officer noticed dark red stains on the front door of the manager's apartment, which were swabbed and sent for examination. The manager was taken to the police station for questioning, where he denied any involvement in Rebecca's death, claiming he spent the entire night in his apartment with his wife. The police also spoke with his wife to verify his alibi. The woman's husband was initially a suspect, but his wife provided an alibi for his whereabouts during the night of the crime. Laboratory results showed that the dark red stains on his apartment door were just paint, leading the police to release him due to lack of evidence. Police investigating the case reviewed video and photo materials from the scene and focused on a public transportation card found near the crime scene. This card, used to pay for public transport in the Boston area, stores data on its usage, including the location and time of each use. Traffic police provided police with surveillance camera footage of the card being used. After reviewing the recordings, police determined that the card belonged to Rebecca and was used by her on the night she went missing. The footage showed Rebecca walking home, appearing calm and alone, with no signs of anyone following her. Unfortunately, this discovery did not lead to any new leads on the identity of the offender. The police obtained another video from a surveillance camera located outside the hospital building, near the Parker Hill Apartments. This video captured a black SUV driving by at the time of Rebecca's attack. Although the video was poor quality, preventing the officers from seeing the license plates, it did appear to match the description given by the witness, and the detectives believed it was a Ford vehicle. Meanwhile, detectives interviewed Rebecca's roommate at the police station. The roommate expressed shock at Rebecca's death and stated that she had been living with her parents while studying for an exam. This alibi was verified by her parents, clearing her of suspicion. However, the conversation was still fruitful, as she provided potentially valuable information that could aid the investigation. According to Rebecca's roommate, Matt, Rebecca's boyfriend, had access to their apartment. To determine if Matt had a motive to harm Rebecca, police reached out to him by phone. Matt explained that he had moved to New York State to live with his parents around the time of the attack. He claimed to be depressed over Rebecca's death. Matt stated that he had been staying with his parents, and they confirmed his alibi. Police obtained a record of Matt's cell phone activity, revealing a conversation with Rebecca on the night of the attack, around midnight, a few hours before her death. However, the cell tower that received the signal from Matt's phone was located near his parents' house in New York State. To verify Matt's alibi, police conducted an experiment and concluded that it would have been impossible for him to drive from his parents' house to Boston in 3 or 4 hours, making it unlikely that he committed the crime. As a result, Matt was ruled out as a suspect. Rebecca's family and friends traveled to her home state of Connecticut to say goodbye, but the police investigation into Rebecca's death stalled. Despite their efforts, no new evidence was found, no witnesses came forward, and no DNA samples were collected. The case appeared to have reached a dead end. Years went by. In 2012, a breakthrough occurred. Anthony White was arrested by the Boston police for trafficking illegal substances and faced a lengthy prison sentence. In an attempt to reduce his sentence, Anthony offered to provide police with information about the night Rebecca Payne died. Recognizing this as a potential opportunity to solve the long-standing case, the police accepted Anthony's offer. Anthony declared that, on May 20, 2008, Anthony received a call from Cornell Smith, an acquaintance involved in the same illicit activities as him. Cornell requested a meeting, and Anthony agreed. Cornell arrived with their mutual friend Michael Balba, who drove a black SUV. The three of them went to the Parker Hill Apartments, where Michael parked in a spot with a clear view of the building. When Cornell spotted Rebecca in a third-floor window, he identified her. They waited until the lights in her apartment went out, assuming she had fallen asleep. Cornell then climbed from the first-floor balcony to the third-floor balcony, where he found the door to the apartment open. However, upon entering, he found Rebecca awake and lying on the couch in the living room. She began screaming when she saw him, and a brief struggle ensued. Cornell shot her 5 times before fleeing the apartment through the front door and escaping with Anthony and Michael in the SUV. Police questioned the credibility of Anthony's testimony, suspecting that he had fabricated the story based on news reports in order to get a reduced sentence. Police did not understand Cornell's motives, as Rebecca had no connection to him. However, according to Anthony, Rebecca's death was a case of mistaken identity. 2 sisters who lived on the first floor of Parker Hill Apartments looked very similar to Rebecca. The sisters were Cornell's rivals in the illegal drug trade. In retaliation, Cornell targeted Parker Hill Apartments, but he was not sure which floor or apartment the sisters lived in. When he saw Rebecca at the window, Cornell mistook her for one of his enemy sisters. Police looked into Cornell Smith's past and found that in February 2008, he was arrested for dealing illegal substances. Shortly before Rebecca's death, Cornell was released on bail. According to Anthony White's statement in 2012, Cornell wanted revenge against the sisters. However, when Anthony White came forward, Cornell Smith was already serving a 12-year sentence in prison for another conviction. With Anthony's new testimony, Cornell was then also charged in Rebecca's murder. Cornell denied his involvement, though. Before the case could go to trial, the key witness, Anthony White, died in prison. There was no longer any evidence to prove Cornell's involvement in the murder of Rebecca Payne. Since Anthony White was dead, the police needed new testimony from Michael Balba, who was with Anthony and Cornell on the night of the murder, in order to convict Cornell Smith. Michael was arrested and taken to the police station, but without evidence, he denied involvement and requested a lawyer. As a result, hopes of solving the case seemed lost. In a final attempt to find a connection between Cornell and Rebecca's death, the police looked into Cornell's case files in connection with a separate case of drug trafficking. During the search, the police came across letters written by Cornell Smith to the judge. These letters revealed Cornell's arrogant attitude towards others, some of which seemed meaningless. However, one letter contained a crucial piece of evidence that linked Cornell to Rebecca's death. It remains unclear why these letters had not been scrutinized earlier, despite being addressed to the judge. The discovery of this key evidence ultimately helped police build a case against Cornell. In a letter written out of anger, Cornell referenced an altercation that had taken place in downtown Boston, leading to the unfortunate death of Rebecca Payne at the hands of Cornell. This letter confirmed that Cornell was in Rebecca's apartment at the time of the incident. The trial took place in 2015. Jeffrey Karp, a defense attorney with more than 20 years of experience, was the first attorney to represent Cornell. However, Jeffrey withdrew from the case after an incident. Cornell suddenly stood up and struck Jeffrey Karp in the head with his handcuffed hand, causing chaos in the Suffolk County Superior Court in Massachusetts. Jeffrey Karp then opted not to prosecute, instead allowing the judge to appoint a new attorney for Cornell. Cornell Smith took a plea deal and pleaded guilty to taking the life of Rebecca Payne. As part of the deal, he received a prison sentence of 18 to 20 years from the judge. To honor Rebecca's memory, her hometown renamed the local tennis court after her. A garden and a National Athletic Trainers Association scholarship fund have also been established in her name. According to Rebecca's father, Nicholas Payne, these tributes were created with one main goal in mind: we don't want her to be forgotten. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Cassie Farrington. Cassie was born on December 22, 1990, in Virginia. She was the second of 4 children to Chuck and Darlene Brooks. Cassie excelled academically and was an active student, she becoming a member of the National Honor Society and participating in sports. Her initial goal was to pursue a career in medicine. However, when Cassie turned 16, her life drastically changed. She became pregnant, which led her to change her future goals and plans. Several major changes in Cassie's life occurred in the next month. Cassie graduated from high school, gave birth to a baby, married Bradley Farrington, and moved out of her parents' house, all within a brief period, just 1 month. Several years later, she had another child. But over time, her family relationship began to deteriorate. Ultimately, the marriage ended in divorce. Despite this, she persevered, raising her 2 young children in Silver City, a small town with a population of about 10,000. At 22 years old, she worked as a nurse at the local hospital and rented a place from a coworker. As she turned 23, Cassie entered into a new relationship with a man named David Barry. He bonded quickly with her children, and she felt grateful for the way things were going good. Rather than rushing into things, they focused on building a life as a family unit. Cassie confided in her loved ones and co-workers that David had brought happiness to both her and her children, and she was hopeful that this new relationship would bring her the peace and happiness she had been missing after her previous failed marriage. On March 24, 2014, Cassie phoned her parents after finishing her night shift at the Silver City Hospital. They chatted for a few minutes, during which she shared her plan to drive home, pick up her children, and take them to school. Afterward, she intended to return home and rest for a couple of hours before picking her children up from school later that day. School staff called Cassie's parents when they couldn't reach her. Her children had finished their classes, but Cassie hadn't shown up to pick them up. Cassie's mother tried calling her, but there was no answer. Thinking Cassie might have overslept after a night shift, her mother asked Cheryl, her landlord, to check if Cassie was home and if she was okay. Cheryl went to the house and knocked on the door, but no one answered. She then walked around the house and peered through the back door window, noticing water pouring from the bathroom into the kitchen. She knocked harder on the door and shouted Cassie's name, but still got no response. With her own key, Cheryl unlocked the door and entered the house. The sound of running water was louder and more distinct. As she walked across the wet floor towards the bathroom, Cheryl called out Cassie's name, her voice shaking slightly. Then she saw Cassie. Cheryl, a coworker and friend of Cassie's, discovered her lifeless body in the overflowing bathtub. She was lying face down, wearing a house robe, as water continued to pour out. Despite Cheryl's first aid skills, she realized that Cassie had been dead for a few hours, as rigor mortis had already set in. This made CPR impossible. Cheryl immediately called 911 to report the incident. She then broke the devastating news to Cassie's parents over the phone, informing them of their daughter's passing. As Cheryl waited for the paramedics and police to arrive, she took a moment to inspect the house. She noticed that the second bathroom, located elsewhere in the house, also had an open faucet with running water. However, the hub there had an overflow protection, so the excess water wasn't running onto the floor but going down the drain. Cheryl also observed that the towel rack in the bathroom had been pulled off the wall and was lying on the floor. Upon receiving the news, Chuck and Darlene, Cassie's parents, were devastated. They stopped everything they were doing and traveled from Arizona to Silver City. Within a few hours, they arrived at the house, where their daughter's body had been found. The police were already on the scene, investigating the circumstances surrounding Cassie's death. The officers observed that there was no sign of forced entry into the house, as all the locks were still in place, the windows were closed, and the glass was intact. Additionally, valuables in the house were still intact, so the possibility of robbery was unlikely. The local sheriff questioned Chuck and Darlene, asking if Cassie had any intention of committing suicide and if she had any reason for doing so. However, Chuck and Darlene firmly dismissed this idea and declared that there was no way Cassie would do such a thing. The police chief repeatedly told Cassie's parents that she had likely taken her own life, as if he was trying to convince them of that fact. However, Cassie's parents found the police investigation to be rushed and confusing. Normally, the scene of the case is thoroughly examined and investigated, a process that can take several days. In Cassie's case, the police left the scene just a few hours after her body was found, and they informed Cheryl that she was allowed to enter and use the house. This worries Cassie's parents, and they decide to investigate the house themselves. After finding water still in the bathtub, they emptied it and discovered black streaks on the sides of the tub that resembled the marks left by rubber-soled shoes. They also found Cassie's glasses, hair band, and a coat hanger in various places on the floor. Cassie's parents were even more suspicious when the police didn't take the time to search the house for fingerprints. They suspected that the authorities might be trying to close the case quickly without thoroughly investigating it. It wasn't until they contacted the district attorney's office that the police appeared to put in more effort. However, they were still unable to close the case due to the findings of the medical examiner. The autopsy report showed that Cassie had several bruises on her body, particularly around her neck. The examiner concluded that her death was a homicide. However, the investigation had difficulty by the property owner having cleaned up and made some repairs after the incident. This meant that the original crime scene had been disturbed, which could impact the investigation's progress. Cassie's parents were met with silence from the police as the months went by. The police did investigate David Barry, a man Cassie had been seeing before her death, but he was quickly ruled out as a suspect due to a solid alibi. However, as time passed, Cassie's parents grew increasingly frustrated with the local police, feeling they were not doing enough to solve the case. Their concerns led Chuck and Darlene to request a meeting with the chief district attorney to voice their dissatisfaction with the handling of the investigation, specifically with Detective Jose Sanchez. After reviewing the case file, the district attorney agreed with the parents, finding that Jose had made numerous errors. As a result, Jose was removed from the case and a more experienced detective took over. From the start, Cassie's family and friends suspected her ex-husband, Bradley Farrington, was responsible for her death. At the time of Cassie's passing, Cassie and Bradley was entangled in a heated custody battle over their children. And Bradley stood to gain the most from Cassie's death, because he will win custody of the child. Bradley Farrington is a former Silver City police officer who had just retired a few months before Cassie's death, and his good relationship with investigators kept him from being considered a suspect. However, Bradley had a clear motive for the crime and possessed the necessary knowledge to destroy evidence. He was well aware of police procedures and how to cover his tracks. For example, the bath water will wash away any remaining DNA evidence on the body, as well as erase shoe prints on the floor. Given Cassie's familiarity with Bradley, it's likely that she would have opened the door for him. Unfortunately, due to the poor handling of the investigation by the local police, so any evidence linking Bradley and to the crime scene was lost and could not be restored. The only remaining way to hold Bradley accountable is through eyewitness testimony. Cassie had told her parents about their family being abused by Bradley, and that he often acted arrogant because he was a police officer. Cassie lived in constant fear, and Bradley's friends were police officers and she couldn't turn to them for help. She had confided in co-workers about Bradley's threats, including the ominous threat that he would make her disappear without a trace. Tragically, her life was cut short, and she was found dead on March 24, 2014. 19 months later, on October 23, 2015, 28-year-old Bradley Farrington was arrested in connection with Cassie's death. Although Bradley was a suspect, the local police mishandled evidence, leaving none that directly linked him to the crime. As a result, the judge made a decision permitting previously recorded statements from Cassie to be used as testimony during the trial. During the trial, multiple witnesses testified, including Cassie's parents, friends, and co-workers, to whom she had confided about the abuse she endured at the hands of Bradley. Notable among the witnesses was Dr. Michael Hunter, a renowned forensic expert from San Francisco. With over 20 years of experience, Michael presented the jury with autopsy photographs and concluded that Cassie likely died from strangulation. Cassie had injuries to her neck, which supported that conclusion. After a warrant was issued for Bradley's arrest, Jose Sanchez, who initially handled the case, appeared in court. Jose claimed he had never considered Bradley Barrentine a suspect because there was no reason to, and also testified that no fingerprints of Bradley were found at Cassie's home. The crime scene was unusually clean, Jose said. He believed the scene was cleaned after the crime was committed, which explains why no fingerprints were found. After 4.5 hours of deliberation, the jury found Bradley Barrentine guilty on September 7, 2018. Bradley was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 30 years. He later filed an appeal with the New Mexico Supreme Court in 2020. Bradley appealed his conviction, claiming the trial court erred in allowing Cassie's co-workers, friends, and family members to testify in court. However, the state's highest court declared it had enough evidence to convict Bradley and rejected his appeal. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Katie Sepich. Katie, a 22-year-old woman, was known for her outgoing personality, intelligence, and vibrancy. Born and raised in Carlsbad, New Mexico, she was the eldest of 3 siblings. Katie is Jean's special daughter, admired for her intelligence and charming personality that attracts everyone. Katie graduated from New Mexico State University with a business degree and had plans to start her MBA program in the fall. To support herself, she worked as a waitress at a local Mexican restaurant. During her time at the university, Katie met Joe Bischoff and they quickly formed a close bond. Over time, their friendship blossomed into romance. Katie shared her happiness with her mother, Jean, expressing her hopes of building a life with Joe. Months later, Katie's dream became a possibility when Joe proposed to her with a diamond ring. However, after Katie and Joe graduated in the summer of 2003, they faced challenges in their relationship. Katie decided to stay at the university to continue her studies, while Joe returned to his parents' home in Gallup, New Mexico, a small city about 350 miles away from Las Cruces. This distance put it difficult on their relationship. Despite this, Katie and Joe made an effort to stay in touch and meet whenever possible. On Labor Day weekend in 2003, Joe visited Las Cruces and spent time with Katie. However, their weekend together turned into a tragedy. On Saturday, August 30, 2003, Katie had fun with Joe and their friends, going from bar to bar and eventually ending up at a local house party. After the party, Katie vanished. The following day, August 31, 2003, Katie's mother, Jean, received a phone call. This changed her life forever. Recounting that day, Jean described it as follows: she had been preparing for a Labor Day weekend cookout with her family and friends when the phone rang at 2:15 afternoon, bringing news that would shatter her world. The caller asked, "Have you talked to Katie today?" The phone call was from Katie's roommate, Veronica, who had been searching for her and had already contacted Katie's friends and local hospitals without finding any sign of her. Jean was informed by Veronica that Katie had left the party by herself the night before. Veronica and Joe had fallen asleep at the party location, assuming Katie had returned home. However, when they woke up in the morning, Katie was nowhere to be found. Her family immediately contacted the police to report her disappearance. Around the same time, a passerby discovered a half-naked woman's body near a desert landfill. Although there was no identification nearby, police officers arriving at the scene concluded that the body had likely been there for less than 24 hours. It was clear to them that the victim's death was no accident. The victim, estimated to be between 20 and 25 years old, had been stripped of clothing from the waist down. Examination of the body revealed self-defense wounds on her arms, indicating she had put up a fight and scratched her attacker. The police found skin particles under her fingernails, providing them with the perpetrator's DNA. Strangulation marks were visible on her neck, initially suggesting it as the cause of death. The investigators concluded that the young woman did not die at the remote desert landfill where her body was found, as there were no signs of a struggle near the scene. Instead, it appears her body was moved there in an attempt to delay the search. A disturbing detect on the victim's body revealed burn marks on her arms and back, suggesting that the perpetrator had tried to dispose of the body or destroy evidence by setting it on fire. The police quickly made a connection between Katie's disappearance and the discovery of a young woman's body. Katie's father was called to the morgue to identify the body. Katie's mother, Jean, said that the young woman's body was their daughter's. Jean struggled to put into words the immense pain and agony they were enduring. As if they were falling into a deep, dark abyss with no way out, leaving them with no sense of tomorrow or any remaining joy. Katie's father shared that when they lifted the sheet, revealing his daughter's bruised and disfigured face, he was deeply saddened. The residents of once peaceful Los Cruces were shaken by the horrific incident. The police were determined to find the perpetrator as soon as possible, aware that there was no guarantee the person wouldn't commit another crime. The investigation into Katie's case began with a thorough examination of her final hours. The police aimed to piece together her last moments, where she was, who she was with, what she was doing, and if she had any conflicts or enemies. Since the party was about a mile from Katie's home, investigating whether she made it back safely was a priority. To start, the investigators spoke with Veronica, Katie's roommate, and Joe. The detectives found it suspicious that these two stayed at the party while Katie left alone in the middle of the night. However, Joe was uncooperative, stating that Katie had departed, leaving her purse, phone, and keys behind. The investigation team then focused on retracing Katie's route home, going door to door to interview residents, hoping for any leads. Unfortunately, no one saw or heard anything that could help the investigation. Investigations revealed a crucial detect: Katie likely returned to her house but failed to enter it. Notably, she had left her keys behind. Upon searching the house, the investigator found Katie's shoes beside her bedroom window. It appears she attempted to enter through the window but was ambushed. Footprints in the gravel nearby supported this theory. A violent struggle ensued, but sadly, Katie's attacker overpowered her. Further investigation led the authorities to believe that the perpetrator disposed of Katie's body at a desert landfill, attempting to conceal evidence by setting it on fire. The central question remained: was the attacker a stranger or someone Katie trusted? With around 40 party attendees, there was a strong possibility the killer was an acquaintance. Could the perpetrator have been Katie's boyfriend, Joe? This led investigators to interview partygoers, unearthing a critical detail Joe did not mention. Several witnesses reported that Katie saw Joe kissing another girl, which sparked a heated argument between the couple. In her state of anger, Katie hastily left the party alone, forgetting her purse. When questioned by police, Joe neglected to disclose this crucial information. He also did not inform Katie's parents about the incident, despite their curiosity about why Katie had left the party by herself. The investigators questioned Joe again about his whereabouts on the night of Katie's murder. They had discovered that he and Katie had a fight earlier that evening after she saw him kissing another girl. Joe acknowledged the argument and explained that he followed Katie home but did not enter her house. He claimed he saw her bedroom light was off and assumed she was asleep, so he returned to the party. However, the new information sparked suspicion because it indicated Joe was not at the party when the attack occurred, and none of the partygoers could confirm when he returned. During further interviews with party attendees, investigators found another peculiar detail. When he returned to the party, Joe called Katie. Then Joe heard the phone ring, and he realized that she had left her phone at the party. Despite this, Joe continued to phone her until morning. Was he trying to create an alibi or pretend to be concerned about Katie's well-being? Investigators asked Joe to clarify his actions, but he refused to cooperate with them any. Katie loved Joe very much, but he didn't even come to her funeral, which aroused even greater suspicion. Investigators decided to test his DNA. They had collected DNA evidence from Katie's body, mostly under her fingernails, where they found human skin cells. The sample's DNA all belonged to one person. The police needed to compare his DNA to the DNA found on Katie's body. But there were problems with that. Joe was out of town, and his lawyer informed the investigators that Joe refused to provide a DNA sample. The police suspected that Joe was involved in Katie's death, given his suspicious behavior. To confirm that, they needed to find a legitimate way to obtain Joe's DNA. However, this took time, and in the meantime, they searched other possible explanations. They investigated similar cases to determine if Katie was the victim of a serial offender. The DNA found on her body was matched against a national database, but no matches were found. The investigators decided to revisit the party where Katie was last seen. They identified the male attendees and asked for their DNA samples, which they all willingly provided. However, none of their DNA matched the samples found on Katie's body, leading the investigators to focus on Joe again. Notably, Joe was the only person who had refused to provide a DNA sample, but the investigators found an alternative method to obtain Joe's DNA sample. Katie and Joe spent time in her bedroom before attending the party, engaging in intimate contact. The police visited Katie's house and collected the bed sheet, hoping to find Joe's DNA. Their efforts were successful, and the lab discovered a sample of male DNA on the sheet. However, the DNA did not match the sample found on Katie's body, indicating that Joe was not the suspect. This discovery raised further questions about Joe's behavior, as he had refused to cooperate with the police despite not being involved in the attack on his girlfriend. The police sent the test results to Joe's lawyer, informing them that he had been cleared as a suspect. Joe agreed to talk to the police again and provided a DNA sample. The results supported the initial findings. Joe was not involved in Katie's crime. When questioned about his initial reluctance to cooperate, Joe explained that he and Katie had been intimate before the party, and he was worried that his DNA would be found on her body. The mystery surrounding Joe's behavior on the night of Katie's death remained unsolved for the police and Katie's family. After Joe was cleared as a suspect, the police explored alternative theories. Party attendees informed investigators that Katie was wearing rings, including the one given by Joe, but none were found on her body when it was discovered. The police believed that the killer removed the rings from Katie's fingers. They searched local pawn shops but did not find Katie's rings. The discovery of specific tire tracks near where Katie's body was found provided another new lead. Experts identified the tire brand and model, and the manufacturer informed the police that these tires were most commonly used on pickup trucks. Unfortunately, this information did not help identify the culprit, and the case hit a dead end. A year after Katie's attack, a similar crime occurred in Wisconsin. A girl in Green Bay was assaulted, set on fire, and left for dead. However, the victim somehow managed to survive by pretending to be dead. Once her attackers left, she put out the flames and sought help at a nearby residence. The survivor described her attackers to the police as two Hispanic men. The police created sketches based on her description and released them to the public. A local farmer recognized the men in the sketches as his workers, Gregorio Morales and Juan. One of them had relatives in Los Cruces, and he often visited them. Both men were arrested. As a result, the police were able to apprehend both suspects. Initially, investigators thought they had identified Katie's attacker, but the DNA test results contradicted this conclusion. The sample's DNA did not match the DNA found on Katie's body. Although Gregorio Morales and Juan were later convicted of assaulting the girl in Green Bay, they were not linked to Katie's case. Gregorio Morales and Juan were sentenced to 50 and 70 years in prison, respectively. The only leads the police had to go on were the tire tracks from the crime scene and the DNA samples of the perpetrator. Katie's family was hopeful that these DNA samples would allow the police to identify the person who took their daughter's life. Unfortunately, there were complications with the DNA evidence. At that time, police were not mandated to collect DNA samples from individuals when they were arrested. Katie's mother was shocked and devastated by the loss of her daughter to a violent man. The family's main concern is to find out the identity of the perpetrator, understand the motive behind this terrible crime, and most importantly, that the killer is held accountable and no longer poses a threat to others. The lead detective gives an update on the case, saying that aside from DNA evidence, they currently lack concrete other leads to investigate further. Katie had fought hard for her life, which resulted in her killer's blood and skin being found under her fingernails. This had allowed investigators to create a DNA profile. Detectives uploaded the DNA into CODIS, the National Forensic Database, and then checked it against the offender database on a weekly basis to see if there was a match. Although they had the killer's identity through the DNA profile, the police needed to find the matching individual in their database to make an identification. Katie's family felt hopeful, they knowing the police would eventually match the DNA to a suspect, bringing them closer to justice for their daughter's tragic death. Katie's murder case saw a major breakthrough 3.5 years later. On December 18, 2006, the lab found a DNA sample that matched the DNA found on Katie's body. The perpetrator was identified as 26 years old Gabriel Avila, a married man of 2. He has a very long previous criminal record and had been released from prison shortly before Katie's death. On November 13, 2003, Gabriel Avila was apprehended by authorities after breaking into an apartment, armed with a knife. Fortunately, 2 young women inside the apartment managed to evade his attack by quickly locking themselves in the bathroom and dialing 911 for emergency assistance. He was convicted of aggravated burglary in March 2004, but released on bond. A flaw in the system caused a significant delay, and it wasn't until 3.5 years later that investigators were able to link him to Katie's death. Gabriel Avila managed to evade police for nearly a year. Then, he being apprehended in November 2004, based on a tip. He received a 9-year prison sentence. While in prison, Gabriel Avila provided a DNA sample, but it took 2 more years to be tested. Once the results showed a partial match with the DNA from Katie's crime scene, investigators quickly jumped into action. They found the truck Gabriel Avila used to dispose of Katie's body and discovered a ring belonging to her in the center console. In 2006, after finding a ring belonging to Katie in Gabriel Avila's truck, detectives investigating Katie's case visited his in prison. Gabriel Avila confessed to the crime, explaining that while his wife was away, he was in the area to buy illicit substances. He claimed that he approached Katie and offered her a ride, which she declined. Later that night, Gabriel Avila encountered Katie again in front of her house. He stopped and offered her assistance, and that Katie told him she was locked out without her purse. Gabriel Avila attempted to help her, but he then attacked and began undressing Katie. What followed was a violent assault. After the assault, Gabriel Avila panicked and decided to strangle Katie out of fear that she would identify him. Despite Katie putting up a brief struggle, Gabriel Avila restrained her, unable to let go, ultimately leading to her death. Gabriel Avila claimed he put Katie in his pickup truck and drove her to a desert landfill, where he left her body on the ground. He attempted to burn the body, thinking it would eliminate evidence. But this effort was unsuccessful. A new DNA sample from Gabriel Avila matched the DNA found at the scene. When authorities found DNA on Katie's body in 2003, her parents were optimistic that it would help quickly find a suspect.